I hope today will be another day of learning. Yesterday was all within India. Today we are moving to other Asian countries to hear and learn the methods they are practicing. Today's panel constitutes of four eminent personalities, two who are hands on farming and two experts on microbes. I shall be introducing them to you all very shortly. Let me inform you all that today's day's course of action. To start with, I shall make a small presentation before the panelist discussion. In between, we shall have two commercial breaks of 3 to 4 minutes each. And at the end of the day, I would request all panelists to have a discussion amongst them in the last 30 minutes, asking and posing questions and subjects of their interest. After that session, I would request our SAP President, Dr. Victor Suresh, to come and give us a take-home message. In the end, vote of thanks would be delivered by our General Secretary, Dr. Ramesh. I request Senthil to share my presentation, please. Go to the first. Yeah. Thank you, Senthil. I have a very short presentation of 4 slides. This is the status of the Indian shrimp production. After the introduction of Venami in 2009, slowly the graph started climbing till 2019. In 2020, there is a dip. We almost touched 800,000 tons in 2019, and 2020 it looks like that we are going to fall down to something like 620,000 tons. There's a sharp dip of 21%. Next slide, Santil. No, before this, one more slide.
No.
Why this drop?
Oh, sir, voice that one. Oh, okay, sorry.
Next one, sir. Senthil, next one, Senthil. Next one, please. Oh God. Okay, go to the second one only. Sometimes. Okay. So why this drop happened? Actually, if you go look closely, the reason for this drop basically is that we had this pandemic coming in because of COVID, and this emergency harvest from March end till April end. The harvest sizes were very very small because of the panic harvest. The expected production of 35,000 tons. What we harvested is only 35,000 tons. Had the crop continued, it would have gone up to 60,000 tons to 70,000 tons. But the major problem started in the second half of 2020 because of diseases like white spot virus, white feces, EHP, RMS. The crop could never come back onto the track, and the expected production never happened. There is a small percentage of say 5 to 10% of people fearing the repercussions and what will happen with the COVID and post-COVID situations. People did not stock. There was issues of labor migration, and the people working in the farm, help hands and all that. The number was shortage, so we could not move forward there. To understand this problem of white feces and EHP, SAP has done work along with the University of Arizona. I would look forward for Saji in trying to explain in detail during the panel discussions. Next slide. So yesterday's success stories, we covered, and some of the points which have been repeatedly mentioned in that is that the good pond preparation, biosecurity, multi-stage farming, the use of functional feeds, the importance of tolerant stocks, and also the cropping pattern. With some of these points, using these kind of preparations, people could easily reach a success rate. Next slide, Sanjay. So today I would like to discuss upon these four important aspects. One is the farming, the operational aspects of it. The second is going to be the onslaught of diseases, the feeds and feeding, breeding and genetics. For farming and their operational aspects, we have very two senior guys with us, two, Saji Chako and Dilip Satyanathan. Both are from Kerala and left Kerala, and they are now operating in different places. Saji Chako is in the west coast in Gujarat. He's a pioneer there, operating a corporate farm there and successfully managing the farm despite all the problems. Dilip Satyanathan started his career in Nellore and then went on to Tamil Nadu coast. He worked in India in the East Coast and moved on to Indonesia, and he's a very big name in Indonesian circles. I remember when we went a couple of years back in Indonesia, that particular time when he took us to a farm that was owned by the president of Indonesia. Like, I mean, they had issues and all, like, and this gentleman took over that farm and he was operating. And as far as the diseases and their onslaught, we have very two senior persons in Dr. Lochtron and Oliver Decamp. Both of them are microbiologists, very senior. And I remember Lochtron, after his findings about EMS, we remember going to Vietnam, and there was a vast program, I suppose. I think when we were attending the program, and in the meeting room, suddenly there was a buzz. Like, I mean, the entire hall was full. So wondering what's in. Then the next speaker was locked on there, and then we can understand the importance and the work which he carried out during the time. And Olivier, we all know, is an expert, and he understands the language of these microbes. And we are trying to see, how we can disconnect that discussions between these microbes to help the shrimp farmers. And he also had a hand in this Oceanic Institute and working on the breeding and the genetics part. So I think, gentlemen, we have very good panel out there. So we look forward to hearing from them. So I would open the discussion now for the panelists. And my first question would be is to hear from them, what is the status of shrimp farming in their countries? So,
Should I start with
yeah.
okay. The status of Indian aquaculture, I mean, just now you saw the slides. Basically, it is, we are on a steady rise since 2010, from when we started with the 1MI. And till last year, I mean, last year we achieved an all-time high of, close to 805,000 tons, in fact. And, this year we have, gone, for a day, like about 21% drop in the production. And the expected production, the data what is coming in is around, maybe 6.2 to 620 to 630,000 tons could be the production expected this year. And the major reasons are like, we had two, the first half was, affected because of the lockdown and the pandemic related issues. Second half, it was the diseases. And in particular, one major issue what many of the farmers faced was basically, it's about, the very poor survival and the lower growth rates. So this is what, yesterday's presentations also, some of them who could overcome the problems. But mostly things are pointing out towards EHP and different other problems. Like, of course, we also had a very serious outbreak of white spot, WSSV, this year. So this is the current status. Was I audible?
Sajibai, there was a small break in between. Now it is okay.
Oh, okay.
Now you're okay.
Okay. Yeah. So basically what I was saying is that, there is a production dip by about, 20%, which is this year the expected production is about 620 to 630,000 tons. And the drop has happened because of two, in the first half, it is all mostly due to the lockdown and, the pandemic related disruption. And second half, we had a lot of disease issues. And in particular, we can say, poor growth, very poor survival. I mean, in many cases, farmers were not able to take it to good sizes. To give an example, somebody who is, trying to grow them to say 30 counts, the survival could drop as low as even 20% or 30%. So that kind of issues. So basically, mostly it is, and also we had a very severe white spot outbreak this year in the second half. So that's about the status in India. Yeah. Madhu?
Yeah, shall we hear from the Dilip?
Okay, Indonesia is also in the increasing trend. In 2018, we have about 300,000 tons, and 2019 about 350,000 tons, and 2020 we are expecting about 400,000 tons. And export to US also increased from 2018. It is 197,000 tons. 2019 was about 207,000 tons, and expecting about 230,000 tons in 2020. And this mainly diseases are there all everywhere, but mainly due to new farms coming up in different areas, especially Sulawesi and all, and they're all doing well. This is the reason, actually.
Yeah, Dr. Lockton.
Yes, I'm here.
Can you tell what's happening in Vietnam side?
Excuse me again, please.
We would like to hear from you about the status of the shrimp farming in your country.
Okay.
Before pandemic and post pandemic.
Okay. So basically, the farming in Vietnam has developed very quickly. So we're shifting from earthen pond-based farming towards plastic line ponds farming and multiple stage farming. So it was a pretty nice success, and the production was very predictable. But sadly, the first half of the year, we could produce a lot, but due to the panic of the COVID-19, everybody rushing for emergency harvest and dumping on the shrimp to the processing plants and causing a huge crash of the price. And because people were so panicked, they afraid of the disruption of the disease, disruption of transportation, lockdown, lacking of people working at the processing plant, etc. So they refused to restock the pond. And once people get over that panic, they resume the production. But then the disease hit. The second half of the year, mostly the Q4, the quarter four of the year, the weather was so unpredictable. A lot of storm, a lot of typhoon, etc., causing a lot of disease outbreak and damage. And I think overall the production this year is not as good. The price of the first crop was good, but the price of the the price of the first crop was really bad. The price of the second crop was really good, but there was no shrimp. Very few shrimp in the market. So that explains why the price is very high at the moment. But overall, we learned a lot from the development of the farming.
Okay. Anything from Thailand, Olivia?
Hello. I will not represent the Thai Department of Fisheries, so for the official statistics, I would suggest to talk with the Thai authorities. But what we've seen is in the same crisis like everywhere else with the COVID pandemic, of course. But for example, if you look at the price of shrimp in the last 3 months of 2020, we could see the price going up and up. So the farmers started to be, I think, happier, more optimistic as the price of shrimp was increasing. This has been, of course, affected by the latest outbreak of COVID in Thailand, because it hit the shrimp market specifically, since the outbreak started in the biggest shrimp market in Samut Sakhon. So this had a direct impact on the price of shrimp and on the mood and also on the perception of shrimp in the market. So you had the same kind of panic reaction as we saw in China before, you know, with the contaminated shrimp or this kind of thing. So this has been, I think, now cleared, I think, through communications, but it had an impact on the farm. I would say overall the production will of course go down of 2020 compared to 2019. By how much, I don't know. I've read some 15-20% down. So this is the one thing. Another thing to consider why Samut Sakhon crisis is important is that there is a substantial domestic consumption in Thailand. So the latest COVID outbreak has impacted the farmers who are selling domestically. So that has definitely an impact. I would say the last thing is about EHP. Definitely we have a lot of EHP prevalence in Thailand. I would refer to something that was presented by my colleague Andy Shin as part of the project we had with IDH and Walmart, where what we saw from 2019 to 2020, actually an increase in the prevalence of EHP in sampled shrimp all over the Thai business. So EHP is not under control in Thailand. It is actually increasing as prevalence. Okay, that's it for me.
Yeah, I think from the status, we will move on to the farming practices. I would like you people to share with us regarding this multi-stage farming, the usefulness of nurseries, one stage or two stage, and how effective are the performance of these nursery shifted juveniles in the farms. Like, so we hear a lot new things coming up from Vietnam. Maybe I would like to start with Dr. Loctron.
Okay, so it's very interesting when we shifted from earthen pond to plastic lined pond, and then we face problem with let's say bacteria, algae, white fishes, whatever, and then we realized that we should have multiple phases to make the system more efficient. The other thing is that due to the contamination from post larvae, so if we do the nursery phase, you know, sometimes you can detect what happened in the small nursery tank. For example, like EMS, you may observe a big crash in the tank within 2 weeks of stocking. Or EHP, you may find that the stock just don't grow, or a lot of size variation, etc. And you have time to send sample to for a PCR detection, and then you know that's the benefit of having the nursery phase. The other thing is that we also realize that a lot of problem associated with nitrite toxicity in water, and also some vibrios related. You know, we found something interesting that in the plastic lined pond, once you have the biomass reach a certain level and the nitrite already kicks in, it will suppress the shrimp immunity, and shrimp will be more susceptible to vibriosis. And that explains why once shrimp stop molting, they die. But if we do pond transferring the shrimp to new ponds, we can rule out nitrite and we can avoid that issue. So that is why Now, many farms come up with an idea that they follow the nitrogen cycle in the water. For example, the nursery phase will last for 3 to 4 weeks. And then the first phase, the second phase, we stock with 1 gram juvenile and farm them to, let's say, 8 grams in another 30 days. Then we transfer them again to another bigger ponds. And we farm the 8 to 10 grams juvenile until 25 grams in another 30 days, and then transfer them again. And by doing so, we could farm shrimp up to 50 plus grams. And it's effective. And by doing so, we can also reduce the water exchange as well. So we found it's very interesting to do multiple phases farming. And one thing that we could also observe that if the stock has some mild contamination with EHP, and we do multiple phases farming like that, we can reduce the stress. So the impact of EHP will be minimized.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you give us the survival percentages also when you're shifting from first stage to second to third stage? How is the survival of the population?
Okay. You know, with regards to the survivability in the tank, it depends on so many factors. So first is the disease. If the stock is disease-free and you have a suitable genetic, theoretically, the survivability could be up to 90+%. But in reality, you know, there's so many factors. For example, if the stock has the contamination, I would say that after 30 days, you may observe, let's say, around 70% survivability. We found some ponds, even though there's no mass mortality happen in the pond, but when we calculate the survivability starting from stocking with a PL until harvest at 30 grams, the survival rate was only like 30+%. And it's raised some concern. I think probably due to more and more toxic Vibrio in the environment, a lot of co-infection with other things like EHP can also reduce the survival rate significantly. And the strategy of genetic selection as well. You know, when the shrimp start molting and growing so quickly, they become more vulnerable to Vibrio infection. And if we cannot manage the system well, the survival rate can be really bad. Yeah, but theoretically, we can improve the survival rate by a lot by having a good system, clean water, clean post-larvae, stable environment, and suitable genetic.
Dilip, can you add something to this?
Yeah, okay. Multi-stage farming is not picked up well in Indonesia because in 2006, some farms have come up with a multi-stage farming, 3-step farming. But 1 or 2 crops they did successfully. But later we had that IMNB issue, and stocking high makes more stress, and transferring also making more stress. So lot of mortalities. So finally, those farms switch out to data stocking. Recently, because we had recently some bacteria diseases, so some farms again rethinking of nursery farming. Some trials are going on, but again they are facing the problem of transferring. So they transfer conventional method like transferring by transfer to next pond, or make a conical flask and running water. You put into the conical flask and it goes to the other pond. All these methods are trying, but none is success. All are in the trial stage. And most of the farms are getting good production by direct stocking, so they don't want to take the risk of this nursery farming and transfer problems. All that's all.
I think shall we hear from Saji Chako?
Yeah, see, basically in India, I mean, yesterday we saw a presentation, by Mr. Hetal Patel. That is a classic example of a multi-stage farming, which was conducted, and the results show that it is quite promising. But it has not come into a large way. But the multi-stage farming I'm talking about. I mean, but in India, the two-step farming, like just a nursery and then transferring from the nursery is it's getting slightly popular, and also the concept of this one like commercial nurseries also is coming up in India. So. So far, whatever results, I mean, okay, the nursery results, we can say the success rate can be like about, I can say something like 50-50. Not everybody is successful, but some are really successful. So I think it is all to do with the style of operating the nursery. I mean, you need to operate the nursery really very well. So maybe it lies in the operational aspects of the nursery. I mean, how do you operate? But definitely, I think with the ever-increasing problems, especially with the EHP, becoming widespread in India, probably I think, I mean, this is the way forward. Maybe many farmers would think in these directions, looking at the performance in other places.
Yeah, Olivia, in Thailand, a few years back when we visited, this is the first time we have seen these nurseries coming up. See, actually, nurseries, what we generally say here is, above the ground and below the ground. Above the ground is the circular tanks, and then, the cement tanks or HDP line tanks and all that. And below the ground is an extension of the farm activity. So what we noticed is nursery operations is not that easy and comfortable with the farming style actually. It's more to do with the hatchery type of operations. So
You're right. I think you and the other panelists highlighted that it's the management issue. And if you start historically, when nursery started, let's say Latin America, it was linked almost to the hatchery. So you had the hatchery people doing the nursery phase and transferring. And then we moved from that approach to nursery on farm side. And then that's a problem, because the way you manage a nursery tank is totally different from the way you manage a grow-out pond. So when the farmers started to implement nursery after the EMS outbreak, it did not necessarily work, because they were just putting a grow-out pond and say, let's call it the nursery phase, and without adapting the rearing protocols. What we've seen since then is a huge improvement all over Asia, and then Latin America copied what people from Asia were doing. And what we see now is the nursery phase really critical in a kind of quarantine, like was a bit mentioned by Locke. It's really a kind of way of checking the quality of the PL. It allows you to feed them, check them out before you transfer them in the pond. And I don't know the experience of the other panelists, but from us here at INVE, we estimate in Thailand something like 20% of the PLs are produced via nursery phase, if you want. This is lower percentage in other countries, but we see it increasing everywhere. Now, the multi-phase that we see in Vietnam, we see some people in Thailand doing it, but it's nothing like the scale of what Vietnam is doing. I think the improved use of the facilities and the more increased efficiency is clear, but I think people are worried about the need for proper management again. Once you have to transfer from a bit what Dilip mentioned, how challenging it can be to mention from one phase to the other without affecting the status of the animals. So you need to have staff well trained. You need a real good management of the whole operation. And it's not always easy. So right now we have people in Thailand doing multi-phase, yes, but I would say it's not at the level of what the Vietnamese farmers are implementing.
We will take a short break and we'll get back after seeing this. Senthil, can you please just play the sponsor slide, please? Thank you, Senthil, and welcome back. So, Oliver is on time actually. Could get back. So I think the next question to the panelists would be like, what is the key water and soil quality parameter, which you think is plays a major role, to pull out a good successful crop, or because of which could be a trigger for any disease or any untoward activity in the farm. And generally, the question we would like to ask is that, is a high strength seawater better than the brackish water? In India, we see a lot of success coming in very low saline water areas, 4 ppt to 6 ppt. The success rate is very high. They're able to sustain this production quantities basically because of these culture areas in these particular area. We are seeing a lot of disease outbreaks in brackish water and also sea-based farms. So I think I would like to start with Dilip, where most of the farms are sea-based farms. Like, so what is your take on that? Like,
Indonesia is mostly sea-based farms. We have freshwater farms also, freshwater, bore water farms also. Brackish water also less, but very less. But water quality parameters, as usual, we have the normal standard operational procedures. We check pH and temperature and all these things. But see, basically the culture is like that. See, first you clean the pond, then disinfect it, then fill the water, again apply disinfectant, then add some fertilizer. Then when the water becomes stable, stop the ponds, then maintain the water. So basically, technicians here in Indonesia, they clean the bottom, then they later they check for take samples and check for PCR. And if suppose if still any contamination there, then again they clean it. Then again repeat the procedure. Then fill the water. Then for maintaining the water quality, the basically keep the water stable, like pH variation minimal to less than 0.5. So normally 0.2. So in the beginning, they apply probiotics, rice bran, fermented rice bran, and maintain the water quality. Like then when 20-25 days, then the water becomes stable, like pH, morning pH 7.6 and evening 7.6, 7.7, like that, then it becomes stabilized. So basically, it's a semi-float system, bacteria more and plankton less. That's why the pH range is 0.2 maintain. Then increase the feed according to, suppose the technicians want average daily growth of 0.4, then he aim for it, and the feed it. Then in Indonesia, we have all ponds are small ponds, like 1,000 square meter to 2,500 square meter. Maximum 0.36 square meter, like that. So all the technicians do siphoning of the. So before stocking also they do siphoning, and siphoning means one worker get into the pond with a spiral. You can do with the machine as well as gravitational. And the spiral thing you put into the drainage pipe, then the worker feels the sediment sludge in the bottom maybe 5 meter from the center, and he walk through this with the spiral pipe, and he removes all the sludges in the area. So whatever not if you remove by central drain, still about 40% remaining. So that also will be removed by the technician. Suppose if we do the siphoning, normally earlier days we used to do siphoning after 28 days, but now because of disease problems we do siphoning even now 14 days DOC. Then if we normally every 3 days do the siphoning. Suppose if you find a dead piece in the siphoning, then we'll do it every day. And we count the dead pieces also. Dead pieces, suppose it increasing more than, so that way we get an idea. Like today if we get 10 pieces, tomorrow it is 15, like that increase. And when it comes to a stage, every day it is increasing, then we know that it is better to harvest that pond. Suppose after 5 days it is decreasing, then we know that pond is recovering. So, and we count also, number of pieces we count also in the dead pieces. So by maintaining pH range and by this siphoning, and also calcium and magnesium. So we used to keep maintain that 1:3 ratio. Calcium about 400, magnesium about 1,300. So that's keep it away. And alkalinity about always keep 170 to 200. By doing all these methods, the technician is able to get a good crop. That's all, Saji. Madhu.
This mortality is what you see, and the mortality rate also is increasing. What do you think? I mean, why is primarily the mortality happening? Is it because of the bacteria, or is it because of any other what I call the parameter, that is triggering this mortality?
Yeah, we have many pathogens, So suppose it is we have mainly Indonesia. We have that IMND problem and white feces problem. So mainly the siphoning is helpful a lot because it prevents cannibalism. So suppose if we don't do siphoning, so shrimp eat this dead ones and more mortality comes. So by removing this dead piece, we can avoid cannibalism. Then mainly IMNV we started here in Indonesia 2006. So now it is everybody used to that. So all technicians used to that. So it's like sleeping with the enemy. So we know how to tackle that. So basically, technicians we feel that keeping the mineral balance, water balance, the IMNV mortality is less. For EHP, nowadays very limited number of EHP cases in Indonesia. Suppose if we have EHP, as usual, the next crop, the beginning crop preparation, we apply quicklime or caustic soda. So normally next crop we don't see that EHP. And the good thing is now all the hatcheries in Indonesia coming up with good quality seeds. I'll give certified is mandated to give a certification free of pathogens. So that way also helping a lot to get a good seed.
Yeah, that is very interesting. What we see generally here in India is, we will discuss that in the disease part, about the EHP and other things. So I think I will move on to Saji. So Saji, what do you think in Indian context, the key water and soil quality parameter? And we have a really different types of culture systems in India right now. We have full strength seawater and brackish water, and also near to zero salinity freshwater farming also. And we have polyculture also with fishes and all that. So what is what is it which you feel which is the key factor?
Yeah, basically, I mean, definitely, when we are talking about the different, salinities and the different water sources, success rate is definitely better with lower salinities, definitely, because one is that, I mean, see, basically the osmotic, the energy what the shrimp needs to spend for osmosis, that is very, very low in the medium salinities or lower salinities, and in very high salinities, definitely that of energy towards that. And so that will definitely, affect the general well-being of the shrimp, and, it can get succumbed. So that is, keeping that aside, I would say, I mean, if you look at the key water parameters, what the farmers, I mean, look at is, one, the most important thing is basically it is about the dissolved oxygen, I would say. I mean, the most key parameter. I mean, so in most cases, I mean, today, most of the successful farmers, I mean, when they focus more on the aeration, two things about the aeration. One is, like Dilip said, aerators, I mean, especially the paddle wheels, once you place it, properly, to maintain the circulation in such a way that, all the sludge can be accumulated to the center and it can be efficiently removed. So that, and in addition to that, people these days with the higher densities, they are going for different methods of aeration, like, diffusers and all that. So basically, the strategy is to maintain dissolved oxygen level at least above 5 ppm. Some people even talk about 6 ppm. Earlier we used to say that okay, the shrimp can tolerate up to 3 ppm and all that, but today the concept has gone beyond that. Now it is mostly like we need to maintain a comfortability of at least about 5 ppm is one. Second, definitely, as Dilip said, I think this pH, especially the varying pH. If the diurnal variations of pH is very, very high, and in many farms we see that with very certain kind of blooms will result in very high pH, like more than 8.5 in the morning itself, and we see a lot of problems associated with it, like scaling on the shells, which results in poor molting. A kind of disrupted molting and all that. So pH is another factor which most of the farmers would be looking at. And another new parameter, of course, it has not become very popular, but these days, people are also looking at the ORP, like the redox potential. So redox potential, what happens, that will indicate the kind of, the age of the pond. As the pond ages, the redox potential can go down, and it can go into a kind of reduced state. So you can, by testing it at least, in the beginning of a crop, you're on the soil as well as in the water, that can also give you kind of, the health status, the general health status for the water quality or your pond in general, the pond health. Okay, and yeah, that's what these are the major things which, and definitely, of course, here in India, we still follow. We don't get into that, like the Indonesian style, where the minimum stocking density, as per when I was discussing once with Dilip, he said, people do anywhere between 100 to 200, shrimps per square meter. That's the kind of densities they do. But in India, mostly, we do somewhere between probably 25 to 50 or 60. So in those kind of densities, what happens? See, our systems are mostly phytoplankton-based systems. We have not gone into that kind of mixotrophic system or a bacterial-based system. So in such systems, I think it is also important to monitor the bloom density, like, by using the, Seacher disk turbidity and all that. So that is another parameter I think people should be looking at. Yes, Madhu, you can.
Yeah. Saji, thank you. But surprisingly, in Indonesia, the pH variation is only to the point of 0.2. Whereas, here we see crossing 0.5 also many a times,
Yes.
like, actually.
Yeah, it crosses really. And I have, my personal observation is that, the successfully, when we were, most of the successful crops, what we see is that, when the pH, drops below 8, and, somewhere between 7.5 to 8, and, with a minimal variation, that gives you much, less trouble in the operation.
Yeah. I would request Lofran to chip in, what he thinks the key factors, the soil and water parameter. Yeah, Lofran, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So, which is the key water and soil quality parameter? Now, we heard the importance of pH and DO, and also the mineral balance and alkalinity. More or less, it's more or less the same. But what do you think? Which one do you think is your pick from that lot?
Okay. It's very difficult to say which parameter is the most important, because shrimp has to be grown in a suitable condition with a lot of relevant parameters. But let's talk about soil. What is we learn is that first, the soil must be clean. So after several crops, you may see accumulation of organic matter and potential pathogen in the soil. So after a few crops, farmers usually need to do the plowing, exposing the organic matter in the subsoil for oxidation, and with proper liming and application of probiotic for faster degradation of organic matter. And also disinfecting the soil with lime is a good practice. But I think what the soil can impact the water chemically is it may alter the water quality, especially minerals and alkalinity. And that may explain why in certain region sharing the same source of water, but farmers are more successful and the other region is less successful. What we learned in Vietnam is that where we can find a soil with good texture and it can maintain good water quality like high alkalinity, seems to be very suitable for farming. And with regards to water quality, it's very difficult to say which is the most important, because let's say if you don't have enough dissolved oxygen, you cannot farm shrimp. And that's nothing to do with the water chemistry, because it's about aeration. But I think in water, one thing we need to pay attention is that something very relevant like ammonia, nitrite, and hydrogen sulfur. Those are really toxic ones, especially once we go with intensive farming. Nitrite seems to be a triggering factor of a lot of things. For example, like vibriosis, because it can weaken the shrimp immunity, and the shrimp tend to be more susceptible to shell disease and systemic Vibrio harvii infection, causing what we call muscle necrosis.
Lachlan, I want to ask you regarding this, when you discussed about the soil and the removal of this organic waste from the soil, you said, you apply probiotics also to remove the organic detritus. In a dry pond bottom, what is the probiotic application methodology?
Okay. Actually, we just take this concept from agriculture, that, sometimes they have a crop abandoned and they plowing the soil, they apply beneficial bacteria in the soil to encourage a lot of natural process in the soil to degrade the waste, organic matter, and enrich the soil with more nutrient. And because, sometimes when you do the farming, you always do the farming, the soil become so anoxic. They never exposed to oxidation, never exposed to oxygen, and a lot of anaerobic process in the soil, not aerobic. So that is why sometimes farmers in Vietnam realize that when the soil becomes so anaerobic, they need to do the plowing and let the soil rest for a couple months. When they do the plowing, the soil will be able to release the toxic gases. There will be more surface area for beneficial bacteria to do the job, degrading organic matter, degrading toxic wastes, for example. And with that, they can also spray some probiotics. Could be agriculture probiotic or aquaculture probiotic, doesn't matter.
Yeah. So, Olivia, the subject is moving to you. So we are now discussing about the key soil and water colorimeter.
Most of the critical points were clearly mentioned by all the people. I would say regarding salinity, definitely I think the productivity in brackish water is higher than in high saline water in Thailand as well. There may be only 2 provinces that are producing it full seawater. I think brackish region have higher productivity overall. The interest for reduced salinity started really with the EMS outbreak. There were so many studies regarding that. But now, when we look at EHP, I think a lot of the recommendations in the management of the pond are to do with finding ways to control EHP. So in addition to the preparation of the soil and the treatment and other parameters were mentioned by the others, people are really looking at the advice from experts. I'm talking scientists like Dr. Kalaya and others about the different approaches that can be implemented in soil or water treatment in order to reduce the virulence of the spores, the effectivity of the spores, or to destroy them. So lime, of course, but now there's a lot of work on other products. Also the benefit of different concentration of disinfectant, on pH for the water treatment. So there's a lot of work being done now to try to implement that. The one thing which is interesting is that what we have seen is the prevalence of EHP is lower when you have a fully lined pond than if you have an earthen or semi-lined pond. It's also lower when you remove your sludge. So obviously the ponds that are fully lined together with the shrimp toilet or with the sludge removal, we have a lower occurrence prevalence of the EHP. Now, farmers, even when you have EHP, you may be able to get a crop, but that means they may need to focus on a higher protein content diet, for example, or other functional feeds that could allow the shrimp to still grow at a certain rate, despite the negative impact of EHP on the hepatopancreas and on the digestibility. So there are different management approaches that can be done, that can be taken up by farmers if they are hit by EHP at a certain level, of course. When you have a major outbreak of EHP, forget it. But when you are at the first phases of the attack of EHP. I think for the rest, DO is interesting because when we started, the discussions were to convince farmers on DO 4. And like mentioned now, we moved to 5 or 6 now. Regarding the soil oxidation, all the work was done on waste, the old way plowing, but also different kind of oxidation. I think what we see now is indeed the investment in more efficient aeration techniques. There's an advantage on efficacy for DO, but also on the cost. So it's more cost efficient to maintain the DO level. And in some areas, maybe not so much Thailand, definitely in Vietnam, it's really the use of shading. So to control this fluctuation. If in Indonesia, we have the semi-biofloc approach, in other countries, it's more a way of controlling phytoplankton fluctuations through shading. I think Vietnam is really the most important, the key example of the approach, much more than in Thailand.
True, Oliver. Yesterday in the success stories also, many farmers were mentioning about having a DO up to 6 ppm. But at what cost? See, there's a general theory that, when your oxidation is very high, when you pump in a lot of oxygen, the feed consumption also is going high. Is there any relation there or not? Because the FCR goes high, the energy requirement is very high and all. I would like to move on to the next point. It's a simple thing, like what is the preferred stocking densities, in each country, how it is going on. I think maybe Oliver can chip in, and say that, what is the preferred stocking density in Thailand in different water systems?
Thailand overall, I would say it's in the 80, 120 or 60, 100 range, I would say. So Thailand has never moved to the same level of intensity that we see in Indonesia or in Vietnam. It's been closer typically. You have some farmers going higher density, but overall, I would say it's still in the 80, 100 range.
Lockton, what are the preferred stocking densities you didn't mention?
You asking me?
Yeah, the preferred stocking densities in Vietnam.
Okay. Yeah, it varies. In low salinity, we may do semi-intensive with 30 to 50 piece per square meter. In earthen pond at higher salinity, they may farm at 50 to 100. And in plastic lined pond, depending on the size, the stocking density could be up to 2,500 per square meter during the nursery phase. And during the second phase, when they stock with the small juvenile of 1 gram, the stocking density could be as high as 300 to 500 feet per square meter. And then they do the partial harvest or they transfer the shrimp again once the biomass reach about 3 to 4 kg per cubic meter. So usually we just think, I mean, the key is biomass, not only the stocking density. And let's say if they farm shrimp up to 50 grams, the stocking density will be like 60 to 70 pieces per square meter. So the key here is that no matter how much we stock, they need to do either partial harvest or transfer the shrimp to another pond once the biomass about to reach the carrying capacity in the plastic lined pond. And usually that number is from 3 to 5 kg per square meter, depending on the salinity and depending on the oxygen supply to that system.
Dilip, we know, you
Yeah,
you work with density service.
average we can say it is about 100. Old farms and earthen ponds, they stick on to about 70 to 80 per square meter. But the small ponds, plastic lined ponds, varying size of 1,000 square meter to 2,500 square meter, they stock somewhere between 100 to 200. Average 150 to 180 normally they stock.
And in these lined ponds, we encounter a lot of problems. So
Yeah,
can you highlight some of those problems, and how you're managing them? And these plastic lined ponds.
plastic land ponds. Yeah, normally we have some blooming problem, but because we are doing it for so many years now, we know how to handle it. So, so technician knows how to handle it. So we don't feel any problem with the plastic line, and it's more or less same. Concrete ponds and plastic line ponds are more or less same. Different with the earthen ponds, maybe. Yeah.
Saji, I think we in India have different experience. Saji,
Yeah.
can you share something, in Gujarat, how it is? Okay, I think Saji is not coming online. Maybe Oliver, can you stand in for him, for Saji?
Sorry, can you repeat, please?
Yeah, in the HDP lined ponds, usually we see a lot of problems.
Well, the experience with all the fully lined system that we operate, and in our experience, it's actually work we do mostly in Vietnam. So I cannot discuss about Thailand, but most of the work is done with the system in Vietnam. So in this case, our approach is we don't face any problem because we have indoor or fully shading. So we control we don't really need phytoplankton. We have maturing water and limited water exchange. So we don't face the problem that you may face when you are a fully lined system, a fully lined pond that maybe has to cope with the fluctuation of phytoplankton or the lack of phytoplankton. So we don't feel the problem in the system we operate.
Lachlan, what is your experience in the problems in lined ponds?
Yeah.
No,
So
not only
basically,
not only the management side, as such, we are seeing in India sometimes the entire sheet getting lifted up. There's some toxic gases under the sheet, line ponds, and then any damage in the line ponds, in the water quality, and the animals are dying and all that. Such kind of issues, how are you managing them?
yeah. So basically, there's a lot of problem with line pond as well. Like you mentioned, I think there's so many things that we need to consider first when we design and construct line ponds. For example, first is the height of the pond bottom with regards to the groundwater. Yeah, because and we need to also design a system that we can remove the water below the liner, and also release the gas below the liner to basically keep the pond bottom always dry and clean. Second is the shape of the pond needs to be designed. So need to be designed correctly, so we can do the siphoning more effectively. So the waste will be accumulated in the central pit of the pond, so we can release the waste more effectively. And also the shape of the pond dike is also very important. So if you have very steep border of the pond, you have less problem with biofilm and other thing accumulated on the liner. And the other thing is that you need to consider cover the pond or not, because algae could be a big issue. So what we learned from Vietnam is that we need to do the pond cover for the nursery phase at least, or the second phase. But for the finishing phase, we prefer to have the pond exposed to sunlight so that the shrimp can absorb more minerals, and the coloration of the shrimp is better, so we can sell shrimp at higher price. So I hope that someday we can sit down and write a manual on, let's say, plastic lined pond design and construction.
Yeah, we to revisit that design once again. Yes. Saji, what is your experience, with this line ponds?
Yeah, the experience with line ponds. In fact, I had. I still have a lot of lined ponds. But my experience with line ponds is the first 3 years. We didn't have any issues. My ponds are mostly, these are big ponds. So, it is about something like about 8,000 to 10,000 square meter ponds. And the experience, currently is that it is, it's quite unmanageable. So my feeling is that whereas we have a couple of ponds, which are very small and, like about 2,000 square meter and all that, these are manageable ponds. So the major issues what we faced was, of course, the technicalities like, the liner lifting up, and these are all, engineering issues which can be addressed. But then on the pond operation part, the major problem what normally we face with the line ponds is that it is the unmanageable, the phytoplankton bloom. So I think, and the frequent die-offs, it's causing a lot of stress to the animals. So probably, my feeling is that, the lined ponds probably, we must go for, as Locke said, probably it should be having some kind of covering so that you can control the phytoplankton, or you must go for smaller ponds, which is, easier to manage through water exchange or things like that.
Thank you. I think we will take a short break, for 3 minutes, and we'll come back after 3 minutes. Setil, can you please run those advertisement, please, for sponsors? Yeah, welcome back. I think I'm yeah, Saji is not there, I think. So I think the next point, what I have in the agenda is uh, just to see what is the future of our shrimp farming. Will it move more towards indoors, or do you people think that that required investment to move indoors will it come into this shrimp industry? Oliver, I think you can start.
Thank you. It's a nice present. Uh, um, I think there will be a range of farming methods. Definitely a move towards indoor fully controlled system. I mean, this will continue and it will expand. But to believe that shrimp farming will be an indoor only, I think far from it. Now, we have to consider a few things. I think it's the efficient use of resources. So what matters is to be cost efficient, but also with the most limited impact on the environment. So the most efficient use of resources, by that I mean water, energy, and labor to produce shrimp. And this is where we're going to have to see what is the most efficient use, financially, but environmentally acceptable as well. And you can look at the WWF report that was done in Vietnam a few years ago, and they could see that the higher the stocking density, the more efficient use, of course, of resources, but also the biggest challenge, because you need technically trained people, you need the infrastructure to do that. So this is where I think we are now. We are at this kind of junction where we have the two moves, the more low technology, low tech approach with low stocking density. We are in this intermediate that we see in different countries, and then some going for the super control environment. And it'd be interesting to see the same when you look at the genetic lines used. Some of them will be definitely adapted to this super intensive approach, indoor, fully controlled, because the animals are selected only for growth. When you have others where the animals have to be able to handle a wider range of challenges, but the farmers can work with them without investing in all the infrastructure. So we are really going into these two different approaches. And I think there's room definitely for both, or more than two approaches for sure. But I would not say, I think it's still a real minor part of the production. It will remain a small part, but it will grow for sure. And I think COVID has led to people to consider how we can move production closer to the demand. And this is where you will see some of these operations maybe now becoming more beneficial, profit-making compared to what they were in the past. When I look at, we have a few people and friends working in indoor farming in Europe. You know, these were challenging technology, but price-wise, the cost of production was so high that there was no real market for these kind of shrimp. So we have to see how they can improve the efficacy there in order to be profitable, really, with a real market, not a niche market for 2 or 3 restaurants in the area, but a real scale. But I think we're still not there, but it's moving quite interestingly. Very interesting development in that area. You can see the work done by the Israeli company together with other groups in Mexico also, where they go developing some purely indoor system. So you see really in countries where you have the opportunity to produce outdoor, but still there is a business opportunity for fully controlled indoor system, even in countries where they produce outdoor as well. So the two models, I think, can coexist.
I think this question I want to put it for Lokran. In Minh Phu of Vietnam, they seem to be betting high on this organic black tiger shrimps.
Excuse me again.
Organic black tiger shrimps.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a Minh Phu. There's a place in Vietnam, Minh Phu.
Yeah. So Minh Phu have some sort of corporate. How do I say? They call it collaborative company.
Yeah.
So they can gather a lot of farmers.
Okay.
They share the resources. Let's say food producing post larvae and deliver to farmers, and they buy back the shrimp after the harvest. Yeah, so in some certain area in Vietnam, especially in the further south of the Mekong Delta, people producing a lot of organic shrimp, organic black tiger shrimp, very significant number.
Do you expect the percentage to go high? More farms coming under tiger farming? Do you foresee in the near future?
I don't really think so. I think farmers in Vietnam have already used up the resources for what we call organic shrimp farming. And once they find a better way to use the resources more effectively, for example, they may still keep some part of their farm for the extensive farming, but they can invest a little bit more and have a more controlled environment for intensive farming as well. So it could be a mixture of extensive farming together with intensive farming. But I don't think we can keep expanding the organic shrimp farming because it's already reached the limit.
Sajid, do you hear anything from India? We hear a lot in India that people are looking for this SPF tigers.
Yes. Now, basically, two companies, two hatcheries have got the permission. One is the Aqua Alma from Madagascar and Moana. SPF tiger has been permitted and they have already brought in the stocks in India. So I think in all probability, what I hear is that by February or so, the seed production, seed should be ready for stocking. So there is a lot of interest being generated in certain areas, where Vanamai, I mean, the farmers who were not successful with Vanamai and continuously facing problems during the last couple of years. And many of those farmers, I mean, are thinking in terms of, going in for a trial with the SPF black tiger. But when it comes to organic farming, I don't think in India that we have much of scope. But SPF black tiger is coming in a small way, and we need to see how it is going to become popular. At the moment, I mean, there are some interest being generated, and I'm sure there will be trials like we will come to know of the real situation probably by the end of this year, probably by July, August.
Dilip, any chances in Indonesia also for organic black
Indonesia,
tiger?
as a farmer, you ask me if I'm still able to produce 30 tons per hectare, size 30 count, Vanamai, then why should I go for a black tiger 200 kilo organic? So still this Vanamai is producing well, so I don't think Indonesia will think about black tiger in the near future.
So the lesser the competition there, like, okay. Any chance in Thailand, Oliver? You see any chances for
Well,
black tiger to come back?
When I checked to get a bit the numbers as were presented by DOF not a few months ago, and 2019 they had, let me check now, 13,000 tons of black tiger produced in Thailand. So CP invested in some of these research programs, but it's still a Vanamay. And as mentioned, if you can produce Vanamay in a big size using multiple phase and considering the genetic ability of these strains, why do you need to take the risk to go with a material which has not been optimized yet for production? So it's very challenging, I think. And for organic, I only visited, I know a couple of places in Thailand, and I mostly visited those in Ecuador. So some of production in Ecuador definitely go for organic, but there are a lot of still challenges to know what is defined as organic, and how much investment by the farmer in order to be certified approved, and is it worthwhile the investment? So this is what we need to, because you have organic certification, but then you have also on labor, on environmental impact, on all of these. At the end, which way is the most advantageous for the farmer and the environment in general? Is it to produce organic, or is it to produce in a more sustainable way? So there are still, I think, quite a lot of points to consider. And as a farmer, it's difficult to decide to invest, to make so much effort before you have clarity on what is going to give you, which is totally normal. So they need to have this clear.
Thank you. I think people, if anybody is logging in from Bangladesh, they'll be very happy to hear this conversation. So I think we'll move on to this disease part. We have this issues with EHP, white feces, and running mortality syndrome. We did discuss in bits and pieces, while talking about the farming aspects. I would like to specifically go into detail and see that, or is there any specific tool to manage and see how to manage the white feces issue? I think, Oliver, you are the right person to talk about it.
Dilip or me? Sorry. Okay. I think the challenge with the white feces is that it's a syndrome. So they were, at the very beginning, there were so many possible causative agents. There was not so much clarity about what was the possible cause. So probably there were a range of reasons at the very beginning. I think over the time now, what we see more and more is from the work done by Locke and other people, we start to have a better understanding, a confirmation of some specific causative agents, Vibrio associated with it, alone or together with DHP. So we have enough evidence for some of these. Now, it doesn't mean that other factors may not come in as well. But the good news is that once you have an understanding that it could be Vibrio alone or together with DHP, you can start to make some planning or come up with some suggestions about how you can handle that. I think I remember when we were hit by EMS, people said, okay, Vibrio was the past, only hatchery problem. Nobody cares about Vibrio. And suddenly all farmers had to reconsider, oh gosh, we have to go back to bacteria, not only virus. And farmers implemented a lot of things to cope with the vibriosis. So what I mean by that is, if we can control EHP as such, I think we have enough tools to control Vibrio in the system, especially in ponds such as those that we have in more small size control environment. I think we have the tools. So I'm not pessimistic at all for that. The problem I see more when I read around is for EHP, because it seems to be spreading everywhere. And this is what worries me. But on the Vibrio, I think now that we have confirmation that it could be a major cause of the white feces syndrome, if not the major one or the only one, I think we have a lot of tools available for us.
Lachlan, can you add something on that?
Yeah, very interesting point from Dr. Olivia. And so far from what we have learned in the laboratory, as well as in the farms in Vietnam, is that first, EHP is a very important triggering factor. But the direct cause of white feces appears to be Vibrio. We could isolate several bacterial strain, Vibrio, that can trigger white feces in the challenge study. We also find that the combination of Vibrio and EHP will produce a very severe EHP. We call it non-recoverable EHP. So it's very clear that Vibrio is the most important direct cause, but EHP is a very important factor that will compromise the shrimp health, the HP structure, and that allow the Vibrio to attack the shrimp more effectively. And with that, we have to consider several factors when it comes to white feces control. First, we have to be sure that the stock is EHP free, clean, and we can prepare an EHP free pond, and water must be thoroughly disinfected. Second is the pond design and the way we farm the shrimp that will minimize the proliferation of Vibrio. Like algae control is very important. Third will be some management issue, management measure. For example, feeding practice. So we feed like 100% of the shrimp demand or 70%. And there's a lot of evidence showing that if we overfeed, shrimp are likely to suffer from white feces more. And that means we have to consider how much should we feed with regards to that genetic, that pond design, stocking density, and etc. Temperature as well. And we also learn from some farmers, it's very interesting that once the temperature drop or there's some stress related, temperature fluctuation, etc., we need to reduce feeding. But if we really reduce feeding, the shrimp just don't grow. Or they may suffer from other consequences. In that case, we have to reduce the feeding amount, but we need to improve the feed quality. And that could be one of the key management to reduce the disease. So that is why you see an opposite trend in Vietnam, that shrimp feed become more and more nutritious. You see in some area, they're using feed of 42% protein. It's crazy. But there's some reason they do that. For example, when they farm shrimp in lower temperature, they cannot feed like 3-4% of the body weight every day. They may feed like 1.5 to 2%, and they're feeding with very high protein feed. And I think with that, we need to study more about the feed utilization efficiency as well. Like not only the protein level, not only how much we feed, but how the shrimp can utilize the feed most effectively. So we can reduce the feeding amount, we reduce the input of nutrient to the system, we will not overwhelm the shrimp with a lot of feed, and with that we can keep the water cleaner and make the shrimp stronger. Yeah, I would say that there's so many factors for us to consider, but at least we know something.
Yeah.
And sorry, not last but not least, there's so many things that we can also put in the feed, like some prophylaxis and some immunostimulants that will boost the shrimp health and will also reduce the pressure of VPO infection as well. I know that there's a lot of research about that.
If I may, just one point to add to what Lord mentioned. On the feed, indeed, the higher nutritional profile, and like you say, it's not only the crude protein content, but it's the digestibility of the quality of what you use in these. And second, because we want to reduce the, first there's the physical quality of the diet, because if it collapses in your pond, there's no point. And linked to that, that means having also, if you feed less amount of pellets into your pond, you make sure that the shrimp get there as fast as possible. So that means you have to work on your palatability and attractability. So it's shifting from this bulk, low quality feed that you flood your pond with to something which is maybe a bit more expensive, but you can put less amount of feed and they just are very attractive to the shrimp. So it's a different way of managing the farm.
Yeah, I want to add something more. That I see the trend that feed mill are using more fermented ingredients just to improve the digestibility, and with that we can reduce the amount of feed needed to deliver.
Yeah, Sajid, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I agree totally with the views of both Locke and Olivier. Definitely, I think it is time that it is not the quantity, it is not the quantity which matters, it is the quality which matters. I mean, and one of the, I think the farmers in general also have understood that overfeeding is the main cause for majority of the problem. So what I have seen is that, even an average farmer, the first reaction what we see when they encounter white feces is that they immediately suspend feeding for at least a couple of days. And in many cases we have seen that that really helps. So definitely it is overfeeding causes a lot of issues. And one more point I would like to add here is that like Olivier said, the attractability and the shrimp should be attracted to the feed. So here one thing what I'm wondering is, will instead of broadcasting the feed 3 times or 4 times like usually we do, what if we go in for a kind of continuous feeding with the auto feeders? So the shrimps are used to it, and they can come if the attractability is good, they pick it up, and the feed wastage can be minimized to a great extent. So I would like to have the views on the use of this from both of you, from Locke as well as Olivier.
Okay. For what I've seen, definitely you would expect the auto feeding to be an improvement. I mean, it has been documented everywhere. Even in countries with lower stocking density, such as Ecuador, they move into auto feeder. Even in Honduras, they use auto feeder. So you see this. Obviously, you see it all in the higher density. So clear. Now, your point is interesting, Sajib. I don't have the data to back it up, but I think it'd be interesting to see in these specific cases here, how adapting the frequency of applying quality diet versus another one, how we would be able to help the shrimp cope with the challenge of DHP, let's say, or the white feces. I think it'd be very interesting. We worked, in my case, we worked mostly on how to improve the feed, on what product to coat on the feed in order to improve. But since I never worked for a grow-out feed supplier, I don't have the other experience there. But I think it'd be very interesting because this is a typical management tool that could be implemented by farmers easily if we have this information. So yes, I think it's interesting. I would suspect yes, but I don't have data to tell you how much and what it is. I don't have it. But I would say my gut feeling is yes.
Dilip, would you like to add something here?
Yeah, 2018-19 Indonesia, we also have a lot of white fish disease, but now it is very, very limited because, as I said, automatic feeder reduces unconsumed feed, and also we apply that siphoning I mentioned. So we remove the unconsumed feed from the pond, so it reduces the organic load, so reduces the Vibrio. So now we have a parameter like Vibrio, we keep always nil or less than 100. So like that we could control white feces throughout this year. So far not a big problem nowadays. And I would like to add something to SDP line Saji mentioned, that algal bloom. Yes, when we were doing that manual feeding, we also had algal blooms in plastic pots. But when later we shifted to automatic feeding and siphoning method, so very less organic load in the pond, so there's no algal bloom. So we don't find any difficulty in HDP ponds line now. Over, Matthew. Over.
Thank you. You guys would like to take one more question, or would like to take a break?
We can take one more question.
One more question to take? Okay. Okay. See, I mean, in India, what we have seen is this white spot virus virulence is very high, and it's changing time and again. Like the recent studies in India, we have one Dr. Sahul Hamid, who is an expert in this disease studies. He is found out. He says it's a new strain of virus. Have you people come across anything like that, or you experienced anything like this? Lokron, would you like to take it? Lokron, could you understand the question?
Please repeat.
Yeah. In India, we are experiencing a new strain of virus.
Which one?
WSSV. WSSV.
WSV, new strain?
It's a new strain is what the studies are saying. So we are seeing rampant mortalities continuously and repeatedly. Is something like that seen in Vietnam?
I don't know. I don't have any info about that. Yeah, you're asking about DIV1 or which one?
No, not the DAV. It's a white spot syndrome virus, WSSV only.
Oh, white spot syndrome virus. It's been in Vietnam since probably 1995 until now, more
Yeah,
than 25 years.
yeah. Maybe Ravi wants to add a point there. Yeah.
No, Lok, the thing is like, in India this year, the virulence of white spot is very, very high. We have not seen this kind of virulence in preceding years. So actually, we have an expert by name called Sahul Hamid. He has taken different samples which are infected with white spot, and he found a new strain of virus. Almost he has checked about 50 samples. All the 50 samples are look to be of new strain. So his doubt is whatever strain that is there presently in India, it is new and it is very virulent. And in the field also, if you see, the virulence is very, very high. I mean, did you do any kind of study on the virulence of the disease and looked at the strain? That's the question what he wants to ask.
Oh, this is very new to me. I'm not sure what is the new strain, whether if that researcher sequenced the genome of that strain and find something really different or not. I don't know.
Probably you can pass on the question to Oliver, sir.
Ravi, when we worked on this with Patrick Sogelos 10, 15 years ago, where we set up a challenge test method at University of Ghent, the professors there had access to different isolates of white spot. Some were more virulent than others, yes. But they were isolated from Thailand or Vietnam, China, wherever, and then we could see some in the challenge test were killing the shrimp very fast, much faster than others, yes. But your point about this specific one, this is where, as Locke mentioned, we need to have this sequence compared to database, and we may see, is it unique to India, or is it one that has been already found in the past in other countries?
Yeah.
Or is it a really new one, totally much more virulent? Then we have to make sure there's no spread to the rest. The usual pandemic story. So I don't know. But if this professor shares information with Locke or with people in Ghent or with Kalaya or whatever, or Andy, they can check this and make comment on it. But I'm not aware of that. This is what either I've not read any publication or I've not received anything from my colleagues on that new strain. But it'd be very interesting to know more about it.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Olivia. And we also observe the same thing. Like at my laboratory, we also have different strain and some is more virulent. And one thing that I also have in mind that once the shrimp is co-infected with Vibrio, they will be very susceptible to white spot, and the disease will kill the shrimp very quickly. And that's also one thing that you need to consider.
Yeah, so it's like, I mean, the virulence keep changing and depending on the Vibrio population, probably. Is it?
The co-infection is a critical point.
Yeah.
And sometimes this is always the same point, people highlight one pathogen and sometimes they don't look at the whole suite of what is hitting the farm at the same time.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting. So any information coming from the team of researchers, I think will be very helpful for everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Dilip, would you like to add something on that? Or?
No, Indonesia, here we don't have that new strain, and also the number of cases also very less compared to last year's because of biosecurity and also SPF full stock. We got all the hatcheries produce WSP. I mean. Free seeds. So we don't have problem, right? I mean, nice one.
We will take a short break, and we'll get back another 2 minutes. Yeah, I think we have two more topics to cover. One is on the feeds and the feeding regime, and also the genetics. I know how these tolerant lines and the growth lines and the balance lines are working the rest of the places. So before that, I would like to ask Ravi Kumar, our past president, about this epidemiological studies on the white feces, which we conducted by SAP. Actually, maybe you can add few the findings what SAP has done in the last year. Like,
Thank you, sir. I mean, we have done an epidemiological study along with University of Arizona. We have collected about 155 samples with classic symptoms of white feces. Out of that, 133 have come positive to EHP. And none of the samples have come positive for any other OIE listed disease. We have done the molecular test within India at RGCA lab. And, we had a doubt. I mean, see, only EHP 133 samples are showing positive. The other 12 samples are showing negative. So what we understood from that is EHP is not the causative agent, definitely. Probably it is triggering too much, dangerous proposition. Probably it's exacerbating the effect of the disease, but definitely it's not the causative agent. Apart from that, what we thought is there could be some enteric disease, which we are not able to detect through molecular tools. So we have sent all the samples to University of Arizona for histology, and none of the samples have shown any disease. So they've shown only EHP. And interestingly, the 12 samples which have come negative to EHP, the growth is very good. I mean, they're showing classic symptoms of white feces, but they don't have EHP. That is point number one. The other point is, I mean, we have taken some samples from the ponds where the salinities are on the lower side. There also the growth is very good, interestingly. And when we have seen the CT value of the EHP, in some of the samples, the CT value is at a level of 18, 19 also. Means the spore count is very, very high. So, I mean, we have come with a conjecture saying that, in low saline waters, the EHP impact is not all that severe because they're growing good. Whereas in ponds where the salinities are above 15, 16, 20 and all that, even at higher CT values, means EHP is at lower level, low spore count also, the growth has been affected. I would like to, take the views of Locke and Oliver on that, I mean, how come the growth is good in lower saline ponds? Probably it's because a combination of Vibrio and EHP is causing the problems. And as in low saline waters, as the Vibrio counts are on the lower side, the EHP alone is not affecting the growth all that much. We would like to, take your views,
Look, me, because we look at each other, nobody wants to react. So, look.
I have to respect the senior. You go first, sir.
Okay, then, all right. All I know is that from the whole project we had in Thailand, where we work with 3 shrimp clubs to screen quality of animals went for about 2 years, I think. And it was done by Fishvet Group. And they looked at the different level of EHP. And in some cases, they looked at on a microscope and then with different molecular techniques. So it was a whole range. All I remember from all the discussions I had with them is that having EHP spores present, did not necessarily lead to a major problem on growth systematically. There were many other factors that came in to explain whether or not you would have. And they also had a level of ranking of the level of EHP as numbers, but not molecular, also visually looking at the hepato and this kind of, to look at the impact. So they had this kind of evaluation of how bad the animals were hit by EHP. which can be different from what you obtain when you just go molecular analysis, when it may confirm the presence or not. So this is one thing to consider. When you mention now the samples you send, I don't know, Locke will confirm, we explained, but the Vibrio that are seen as causing white feces syndrome may not be those that are listed on OIE. So if the lab in Arizona screened only for the HPND strains, either the genes or the toxin production gene, it may have come negative as a clean animal, while in fact it might have been really invaded by the Vibrio that Locke has demonstrated cause white feces. So this way maybe Locke can confirm that.
Yeah, very interesting. I think the impact on the growth is the combination of not only AHP, but we also with Vibrio, like Dr. Olivia already mentioned. And the other thing is that we have to take a deep breath and think about this. Let's say in one pond, and we just take a few shrimp, and the level of infection across the population is not even. And actually, we have done some sort of research like this. So we sample multiple samples in one pond, and we could see a big variation with regards to the number of spore per gram of HP across the pond. So in one pond, you may find some shrimp are heavily affected, and the rest may be doing okay. So it's also, I don't think we have enough evidence to say that the level of EHP is not correlating with the growth, but there's a lot of other factors as well. Yeah.
Just one point, maybe like on this one. I'm going to say, when we try to help farmers when they come with samples of shrimp, and the approach initially was you need to collect X number of shrimp from your pond, let's say. But at the end, another approach that the fish vet group team and the others were doing was, no, don't go for this. Go for the weak one. Give me sample of the small size animals. Don't give me random. So at the end, they were targeting the weird looking shrimp in order to have an idea whether or not EHP was present in the pond. But it's not a nice epidemiology study, but it's just a tool to help the farmer to say it is there. Maybe try to implement different procedures to cope with the fact that EHP is present, even if it's not hitting yet your pond.
Yeah, very good point. And the point is that we need to find the weak ones in the pond. You know, for example, let's say if you go to a pond and you just throw a cast net and you throw at the feeding region and all the strong shrimp gather over there, you may not find anything. But let's go to some dead point, that area in the pond, you may find something interesting.
When we have taken the samples as such for this study, we have taken the weak animals only. And the other interesting point is about the salinity. Could you see the difference of impact of EHP in lower salinities and the higher salinities? Is there any difference in Vietnam, Locke? The impact of EHP on the crop or on the growth per se?
Mm-hmm. I don't have enough data to support the claim whether at low salinity we have less problem with EHP. I don't. But my gut feeling tell me that probably at low salinity, the impact of EHP is less based on the data that we got. And the other thing is that you need to consider at low salinity, usually they farm shrimp at low stocking density. And we understand that the shrimp can spread the disease from one to the other very effectively. So the higher the density is, the impact of EHP become more obvious. And you know, I think EHP is more or less like MBV, if you recall Monodon. For example, if you have an EHP infected shrimp, you throw them to a big pond, they may resume growing. And we did some study, just a fun research, that we infect the shrimp, we understand the EHP load in the shrimp, and we just farm that shrimp individually. Or we farm several shrimp at very low density, and then we take sample, we found that the EHP load reduced. So that means the shrimp also excrete, also release a lot of spores. And then the spore release can reinfect other shrimp. So if you have lower in stocking density, the impact of EHP theoretically will be less.
But if you look at Indian operations, I mean, densities are almost the same across the different culture areas, whether it is high salinity and low salinities. And farming is as such thriving in the places where the salinities are low. I mean, in Andhra Pradesh, you have come to Andhra, you're very well versed with the place. We have 3 districts, East Godavari, West Godavari, and Krishna, where the culture is done in very low saline waters. Whereas the other parts like Tamil Nadu, Ongole, Nellore in Andhra Pradesh, and Gujarat in West Coast, the culture is done at higher salinities, 15, 20, 25, 30, and all that. The success rate is much better in these areas where the salinity is on the lower side. And densities wise, there's no difference. What I get to think is as the bacterial loads are on the lower side in the low saline waters, as the problem is a combination of some kind of Vibrio and EHP, as the Vibrio loads are less in these low saline waters, they're able to get better results. That is the inference what we got from our study also. And we have not done 10 or 15 samples, 155 samples, and we have taken weaker animals, and we have taken the sample from good number of animals, not one animal and all that, and so we're of the opinion that in lower salinities, the impact of EHP doesn't look to be all that severe, as the bacterial loads are on the lower side in low saline waters, as it is a combination of Vibrio and EHP, as you rightly pointed out right at the beginning. Yes, Lo, go ahead.
Yeah, very informative. And I would love to have a master student to pursue this hypothesis, at different salinity, how the EHP will impact the shrimp. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, I would move on to the next topic, genetics. Now, we are seeing this SPF Vanamai broodstock. We are seeing different lines coming off late. Initially they're talking of growth lines, tolerant lines, balance line, and star. Different names they're giving. Like, so is it the same thing in all your places also? Like, you see any difference? The growth line stocks, what we see is the growth is really good, but the survivals are very bad. And the tolerant ones are able to withstand the white species issues and able to get a better survival, but the growth is very slow. If there is a white spot syndrome outbreak, they're also losing the crops. So I would like to take your opinion on this. Who will take? I think Saji, you can start with this, Saji Chayko.
Yes, in the last couple of years, we are hearing about the tolerant line. I think the first to introduce was API. In fact, I had taken a crop also, and definitely, we could see some kind of of course, we didn't have any disease issues those days. We did get a crop. Now, one interesting observation, what we hear from many farmers who have been using this tolerant line is that it is a bit slow to grow. So definitely, in the emerging situation, I think probably the breeding companies, I think we need to look at, as Locke was discussing earlier, and see, like, the systems, I think, the culture is going to evolve into, multiple styles, like probably super intensive systems, which is completely controlled. and the traditional systems like which is exposed, and there is a lot of threat, from the biosecurity angle. So for that, yes, definitely we'll need this tolerant line and this balance line. I mean, so I also, I mean, sometimes, I mean, fail to, really understand, I mean, what exactly we are talking about, this tolerant line and the balance line and the growth line. So balance line, what I understand is that, I mean, it is tuned for both towards a bit of tolerance as well as, balanced growth as well as the immunity part of it. But then, my feeling is that I think this is a good direction in which, I mean, the breeding companies are moving. And probably this is what I think the breeding or the genesis should focus. Because I think it is the success for shrimp farming will definitely depend on the seed robustness. Because what we see is that, I mean, see, if you look at the history of Vanamai farming in India, it was introduced in 2009 officially. And if you look at, I mean, the initial few years, we can say that, I mean, without much of intervention, I can say that, I mean, almost every farmer was successful. I mean, you can see from the growth rate, the initial, 3-4 years, it was like, I mean, the Vanamai farming seemed like, it is a cakewalk, like it was so easy. But today, as we are moving forward, we are, facing with more and more threats, ever increasing threats. So here, so what sometimes I tend to think that, I mean, are we losing the kind of robustness of the animals? I mean, the shrimp. So this, that's a doubt, which comes into the mind of many farmers. And it's heartening to hear that, I mean, the breeding companies have started thinking in those lines. Like, I mean, they're talking about, bringing in more robustness and, all that. I mean, so this is a wonderful development. Yes. Yeah. So that is my thoughts on the different kinds of lines.
Yeah,
Madhu?
Dilip, Dilip, can you please chip in something? What is your experience?
As a farmer, I prefer growth line because I want to make more profit. But if the farming becomes impossible, then tolerant ones are the option. But there also, if we say tolerant ones don't grow properly, then of course your profit will become less. So it is challenging. So we cannot say this is better, that is better like that. It is challenging. So we are, as a farmer, I am open to all. When the farming becomes impossible, I go for tolerant one. But I always prefer the growth ones.
Yeah. Dr. Lotran, which one you would like to breed?
Okay. I think this is a very, very interesting topic. The resistant one, the very fast grow one, and the balanced one. Which one is better? So in analogy, I'm a big fan of cars. I would say that we have different types of cars, like sport car, super fast, like the SUV, like a sedan. And I think, we have to use the car with the right purpose. And I think we have to consider that the line needs to be suitable for our farming condition. I think that's the point. For example, let's say, if I want to farm shrimp that will grow really fast, I need to be sure that I have all the infrastructure that will support for that growth. Just like I want to have a Ferrari, I need to have a very nice highway or a racing circuit for the car to perform. Otherwise, I may end up having a disaster. And I think that's very true for shrimp farming as well. For example, now we are shifting to more intensity, and we are having, higher in stocking density. We need to have better infrastructure. We need to have more control. And that may result in higher in investment and higher in production costs. And with that, we may need to have a faster growth line in order to, surpass the break-even point and we can make profit. My calculation is that if we farm shrimp at, let's say, 150 pieces per square meter in southern part of Vietnam, we need to have the ADG of at least 0.3 grams a day to break even. So that means I cannot use the tolerant line for that type of raising circuit that I already built. But let's say in areas like in China, where you have very harsh environment and a lot of disease, a lot of contamination, you may only need to have the animal that will survive. And eventually they will grow to the point that you can harvest and you can sell shrimp at very nice price. So you need the resistant line over there. Or you may have a mixture. You may have a system that you cannot fully control, but at least, you can support the shrimp with regards to water exchange, oxygen, etc. You may need to have a balanced line. So I think, and the other thing is that very interestingly, that different lines may grow differently, and their feeding behavior might also different. For example, the very fast growth line, their feeding behavior is very aggressive. So that means you may need to have a system that support them with enough oxygen, with nice feeding program, so they can take enough feed, and the feed might need to be more nutritious as well. Otherwise, once they molt so frequently, they may end up having a lot of problem with Vibrio. They may tolerate to nitrite less effectively. And, there's so many factors that we need to consider. I think it's very important that now genetic company and the producer and hopefully the researcher will be involved in order to evaluate those lines and give recommendation that, okay, for this line, you need to have X, Y, Z condition to be sure that you can farm them successfully. I don't think we have, how would I say, a wonderful line that can perform in any condition. Yeah. But I think it's very interesting to see how fast the genetic science has improved and has made a lot of achievement like this. When I returned to Vietnam 7 years ago, at that time, the ADG was like 0.2 grams a day for shrimp. But now, believe it or not, we see a lot of lines that can grow at 0.5 or even more grams a day. So there's a lot of things we have to improve as well in order to be sure that we have all the knowledge and all the infrastructure needed to support those lines.
Olivier, as a Empire, what have you got to say?
Yeah, I think it's really a very interesting subject. The point we know in Asia, with the model we produce here, most people need growth. So this is the interest in Asia is typical. I know the percentage varies from country, but every farmer, we want fast growth. But it's not unique to Asia. We did a survey in Latin America, and all farmers in Latin America did the same. What do you want? Fast growth. So as mentioned by Dilip, this is every farmer's dream. You want to have the highest ADG as possible, whatever your system. But in addition to all the points raised by Locke, I want to mention another thing is that when you switch now to nursery and multi-phase farming, you may be able to accept shrimp that grow a little bit slower because you have an optimal use of your facility by transferring, you stock every month or every 2 weeks or whatever your facility, and you move them phase by phase. That means you have less pressure on them to close the cycle in 50 or 60 days. because you move them step by step. So this is where I see an option in a way for these lines that may not be the fastest in the market, the Ferrari or the Porsche, but still good one, an Audi or whatever, but still will give you what you want without having to invest in the full biosecurity measures that is the strictest way. So for me, this is a very nice development we've seen the last few years, this multi-phase, because if you combine this with the genetic developments, you can do, you can find, I think, the right balance between the two. On the genetic side, from my discussion with some of these companies and the colleagues, obviously this is the fast growth, the tolerance, the balance, but also you have those focusing on low salinity. So you can start to pick and see which of those should be provided to certain countries based on the conditions of the country. And you need to work with the local partners in order to optimize the offer for the farmers there. But it's very interesting. And indeed, when you listen to guys from Aquavolsk, the technology that is used now for the development is very exciting to see what they're able to achieve.
It could be something sort of a crossover in terms of automobile language, something like a cross between the SUV and the sedan. Like, I mean, so it can perform in most places. Like that's a dream.
I think we are nearing the end of the program. I would request, there are participants have asked few questions. I would like to ask them now here. Martin has posed a question to Lockton, Dr. Lockton. Is nitrite more critical than ammonia in increasing shrimp sensitivity to Vibrio? What levels increase this sensitivity?
First, I don't say that that nitrite is more important than ammonia. Both are toxic ones. But I see the problem with nitrite is that later during the culture, let's say on day 40 onwards, nitrite will increase. And there are some factors that will determine the toxicity of nitrite. First is the salinity. In lower salinity, nitrite toxicity will be higher. And that is why you may see problems related to nitrite during rainy season. And the other thing is the shrimp health condition. I don't know, let's say at higher nitrite level, it will compromise the shrimp immunity. And that is why shrimp become more compromised and more vulnerable to Vibrio. Or, hello? Yeah. I think in high salinity, 5 ppm of nitrite is the level that start to make some impact on shrimp. At lower salinity, I don't know, because sometimes it will be very, shrimp could be quite susceptible at low salinity with regards to nitrite.
Okay, one more question by Veera Chami, yesterday's speaker. If we remove all the sludge and not giving enough sufficient time for denitrification for recovering the alkalinity, how to compensate for lost alkalinity in the sludge? Increasing alkalinity becomes costly. Any suggestions for this issue? Is the question understood? I mean, by removing the sludge from the pond, it has an influence on the alkalinity. To increase the alkalinity, it's going to cost. So he's asking any good suggestions for that. Who would like to take this? Dilip?
Yeah, my point is that I really don't understand the connection between the alkalinity and the sludge removal. Sludge, basically it's organic waste. So I mean, I don't see a relation, but if anybody else can understand, it would be, you can comment on that.
Dilip, can you see any
Initially,
connection there?
we normally add the lime only, quick lime, uh, mix with water and keep it for 48 hours and add to the pond. That will increase the alkalinity.
Okay. One more question to Dr. Olivier and Dr. Lautran uh, regarding the mineral deficiency. What possible conditions, environmental or physiological, could result in improper molting? And in what aspects do these conditions differ for Vanamai and Monodon? Mineral deficiency.
Okay. I think there's a lot of factor may result in improper molting. So first, what is the definition of improper molting? They molt more frequently or they molt less frequently? So mineral is one factor. The other could be alkalinity, pH, feed, oxygen, a lot of things. But so far, is my observation is that Vanamay tend to more frequently and they grow faster. So that is why we have to pay more attention on the water chemistry, especially alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, potassium, and be sure that nitrite is less, and other I don't know what else can we add. Monodon tends to have less issue with those mentioned parameters because they molt just less frequently. I hope that Dr. Olivia can add something because I am not an expert in water chemistry.
I think the only point is, like you said, the Vanamay grow faster, and on top they are reared in lower salinity. So you put the two together. This is why there's more focus on providing additional minerals to them. I've seen the benefit of some of the minerals when added to the feed. So there's some documentation on that. But for the rest, is really managing the whole. I mean, the condition, like you mentioned. I mean, there's nothing new to add to it. The difference between Monodon and Vanamay is a question of, I think, the rearing conditions and the overall growth rate, and therefore the molting. I would not add. I don't have anything more to add to it. I don't know if others have to comment, but I don't.
One more question to Loctron, that people while transferring 8 gram of shrimp from ponds to the next stage farming, they're having a transfer mortality. They're not able to transfer properly. So they're asking for methods, how it can be easily transferred from one pond to another at 8 grams level. Please unmute. Loctron, please unmute.
Sorry. So I think if we want to do multiple phase farming, first we have to have some idea about the workflow in that farm when we design. So the pond can be adjacent to the other pond, so we can move shrimp from one pond to the other very easily. By sometimes they use net, and then with basket, they just scoop the shrimp in the basket and just run and dump the shrimp to the other pond in maybe 10 to 20 seconds, and it will not be an issue for the shrimp. And now some farms already develop some sort of engineering that they can release the shrimp through pipes from one pond to the other, or they may use some pump that can pump shrimp from one pond to, very far distance of a few hundred meters or up to a kilometer. So we can transfer shrimp up to, let's say, 30 grams, not an issue. But I think there's something that we need to consider. First is the water chemistry of the two ponds must be similar. So usually they prepare the new pond and they pump that water from new pond to the old pond and let the shrimp familiarize themselves with the new water. They may molt and harden the shell before being transferred. And they also need to reduce feeding before transferring the shrimp to make shrimp less stressed. Yeah, and they need to prepare the new water with probiotic, with suitable water chemistry, etc. So a lot of things that farmers already learn, and they do that quite effectively.
Yeah, I would like to ask one question about this nutrition, the role of functional feeds. Yesterday, in one of the success stories, one of the farmer also has got his own feed mill he manufactures. He was mentioning about the limiting factors, in terms of organic selenium and vitamin C. So I would like to hear the role, that we have a lot of functional feeds which are available in the markets. Are they doing the job, or is it just to increase the price they're trying to name and then fix it later? I think I would request Dr. Pardon, Dr. Yeah, I think Dr. Oliver, can you please take this?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I will not comment on the technique to increase the price of feed. I will not comment on that. But what I would say is there are a few things. I think the farmers see the value of using, whether you call them some functional feed or health booster or nutritional booster diet. People have seen over the last few years the benefit of that. Now, the challenge is for the farmer to use them as full part of the daily diet, or as a partial replacement according to the time of the year, the time of the period of the crop. But I think the benefit of providing extra nutrition or health factors at critical time of the crop, I think, are recognized by the farmers. The problem can be from the cause of a problem for a farm is not only the diet, it's a lot of things. And sometimes the farmer expects that switching from a standard grow-out feed to a functional feed or a health booster will be sufficient to offset all the rest. And of course, it's not the case. And this is where we have the problem. I think from my experience, farmers can see the result once they have a very good interaction with the technical team of the manufacturer, because then you can work along with the farmer and show, all being equal, what the inclusion of that health booster or functional feed can do to the shrimp. The problem is when the farmer just buys it from a warehouse somewhere and expect, looking at the claims on the label, that it will solve all the problems. This is the challenge we face. And then farmers may have disappointment or have concerned doubt about what is really the functional feed doing. But to go back to what was mentioned earlier, a typical functional feed should have probably better quality nutrition, digestibility, improved palatability, and some health component in there that are not part of the standard feed. And I'm not talking the economy range where there's almost nothing inside. So you can imagine that these will lead to an improvement to the performance of the shrimp, obviously. But the problem is how this functional feed or booster diet will be included as part of the feed management. If they have higher nutrition profile, higher protein content, should the farmer apply the same feeding regime or not? And how he may have to adapt his management accordingly. But what I see is on the nursery phase, there is no doubt that there is substantial use of health boosters and of functional feed. This is obvious. In the grow-out pond, this varies from country to country. I think in Thailand, there is definitely an interest for this and the use. I also see it happening in Vietnam, but definitely there is recognition of this.
Saji, would you like to add something?
Yeah, basically, I mean, here in India also, I mean, we are seeing the rise of, a couple of companies have already come up with the functional feed. Now, one question which I would like to ask is, like, I mean, functional feed in the sense, I mean, what function is that it is? I mean, I think, I mean, we need a kind of a definition as to the function. Like, I mean, see, today, most of the functional feeds which I have encountered is most of them are talking about the immunity boosting properties of the feed. That is the general, USP of the functional feed. But probably like in the breeding, like the seeds, we have the the growth line, the tolerant line, and the balance line, like that. I mean, probably the functional feeds will have to define their functions. I mean, that is one primary requirement, I think, so that the customer really understands what it is. And definitely, nutrition has to improve. And as a farmer, what I understand is that the feed, once we have the right components and the quality, it's going to cost money. So how do we adjust that? I mean, probably like a better nutritious feed with lower feeding rate, and ultimately we should be bothering about how much it costs for you to produce 1 kilo of shrimp, in terms of not the quantity or the conversion. It is all about, I mean, ultimately a farmer who works towards profit. I mean, he should be bothered about how much it costs. So this is what I think all the feed companies should be working on, and while defining the functional feed as well as while designing the functional feed, it is not just about the cost of the feed per kg per se. It is like
to comment. I think you are totally correct. We came with different protocols and different products according to the nursery model. And by that is to answer exactly your point. If you have a nursery model which is focusing on fast growth and high water exchange, we came with the protocol that was focusing on high nutrition for boosting the growth, because you have continuous water exchange, you expect to have less problems of water quality. We had a different protocol that would be adapted to limited water exchange, where you have to maybe focus on other things. And it's important that the feed companies explain what each of the diet is designed for. It's not good for all. There's an angle to it. And you're right. This is a question of communication, yes, and clarity there. Fully agree.
Dilip?
Yeah, it's a new concept here also. Only one feed company has so far come with functional feed. So in my experience, I had some problem, IMNV. So I used functional feed, but nothing improved. So finally, I end up in more loss because I paid more money for the feed. So even if you use functional feed also, you have to maintain your water quality very well. Then only it will function well. If you are able to maintain your water quality very well, then you don't need a functional feed. Normal feed also will work with that. So it's under question. So I don't know how it's going to help. Okay, Madhu.
Dr. Lockton, final words on this functional feed?
Right. I give some comments about functional feed?
Yeah.
You know, um, I think it is a very broad term when it comes to functional feed. There's no such clear definition what is functional feed. But I think that there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of digestibility, in terms of improving shrimp health, in terms of providing nutrition, minerals more effectively in the feed. There's so many things that we can do. And, you know, when you compare doing the top dressing at the farm level, you know, you may not have proper dosing, a lot of leaching, etc., versus mixing everything up in the feed mill. Doing the second way will be much more effective. And we know that shrimp farming has been facing a lot of new challenges, disease, white fishes, Vibrio, EHP, whatever. And there's a lot of research and development showing that there are some substances, there's some compound could be added in the feed and protect the shrimp. That means we can do something about it. And I think it's also quite economical. It makes sense in terms of business. When we compare the cost of formulating functional feed versus the outcome versus the profitability. So I think the point here is that when it comes to functional feed, we must have higher level of transparency. Let's say from the feed mill who produce the functional feed, they need to describe their products and what farmers should expect to get from that functional feed. So by doing so, it makes more sense that farmers will be willing to pay certain percent premium to get what they need. And I think by doing this, you know, there will be some improvement and farmers have more choices.
I want President Dr. Victor Suresh, you know, to add a word to it. We see a lot of people adding a lot of things in the farm side actually. You know, it's a well researched product. Every feed is a well researched output. Still, in the farm level, people try to add something to it, and you know, it's really useful or not. I mean, nowadays, it's just a psychological thing.
Thank you, Madhu. I think uh, Dr. Olivier provided a criteria of what you should expect in a functional feed. As a, you know, those are very important that we follow those criteria. That the feeds have something that improves immunity, some stimulation of the generic immune system of the shrimp, but also provide a higher plane of nutrition and also provide attractability and palatability. So, you know, shrimp will be able to eat it. You know, those are very important criteria. Now, Dr. Luktran raised the other important point that they have to be told, farmers need to be told what is in the feed. You know, then only they will be able to understand what is in there and then avoid any kind of duplication. And like, for example, you know, you put a higher level of vitamin C in the feed. I mean, this is a highly stable vitamin C that the feed manufacturers are using. And there is really no need to supplement with more vitamin C by the farmer, you know, and so it's just an expense that can be avoided. So, so there is a need for educating the farmers on what they're getting, you know, what they should do as a complement. I mean, today one of the challenges that we have is we cannot add probiotics in the feed. It's largely because of the probiotics are not resistant to the high temperature that's used in shrimp feed manufacturing. They need to add it, and it's kind of challenging to add it by the feed manufacturer to top coat and things like that are not that easy. So so those are the things, you know, that the feed companies can teach the farmer how to use the product. And I fully agree with Dr. Olivier, you know, that the functional feed is not a substitute for good management. And it's important that you use good management, and the functional feed is only a tool that needs to be very strategically used in your production. And of course it's going to cost more because of the things that are added, and also because of the high quality of the feed. It's going to be more expensive, so they need to use that feed very strategically, rather than you just cannot say that I'm going to forget about everything else. I'm going to forget about my water, my disease situation, and all that, and then use functional feed as the solution. I don't think that's the way we should say.
Thank you, President. We will take a short break. I requested Senthil to run the slides twice, so that we can take a little extra time. When we come back, I would request all the panelists to list few questions for yourselves. Ask among yourselves for 10-15 minutes. If any questions which you want to ask with each other. After that, probably we'll ask our Victor Suresh would give the close take home message. Okay, Senthil, give us a little break. Little extra break. Thank you, Senthil. We'll give a little more time. Oliver is back. We're waiting for Loctron. Saji Chaiko has yet to come. Dilip, is there any question for you to ask to Olivier or Lofton? You could pose, you can use, maybe we have another 10 minutes for that.
I already attended two section with the Loctran last month.
Oh,
So
great.
I don't, I don't have any, because he gave a presentation to Indonesian farmers last month.
Okay, okay, good. Very good, very good. Saji, you would like to ask anything, Saji, to the other panelists?
Yes, I have a question to Loctran. It is like, I mean, we were discussing about the genetics, I mean, the breeding lines, tolerant and all that. One thing is that, I mean, see, we have, evolving issues like EHP and all that. I mean, again, the challenges faced in different countries are also different. Like, I mean, some countries affected more, some countries are not affected. So I mean, say I'm asking in the context of India, like, I mean, what could be the strategy for the adoption of, getting into the different kinds of lines? Like, I mean, say, for example, China in the last a couple of years, I mean, we are seeing that, I mean, with the challenges they're facing, I mean, they're moving more towards the tolerant lines. They're importing more of tolerant line broodstock and things like that. So what is your opinion on that? I mean, what is the path we should take, I mean, for a country like India?
Yeah, very interesting question. And like I mentioned, I think we need to choose the line that makes the most sense in certain area in terms of survivability. And, the bottom line is the profitability to farmers. And, for example, like in Vietnam, they need to have fast grow line for the plastic line ponds because the production cost is already high. And like Dilip also mentioned that he needs fast grow line because he has plastic line ponds. I think in India, more or less, so far as my observation in the past couple of years, you having an accumulated issue, more cumulative issue, with probably the ponds bottom, more contamination, more prevalence of EHP, etc. I don't know, should you go with a strategy that the fast grow line will eventually give you the break-even point as fast as you can? Or should you do something with the resistant line? If I have a choice to choose with your existing farm system, I may do something like this. I may invest a good design nursery system, or at least two-phase farming, nursery and then plastic line pond, and grow shrimp to certain size. For example, let's say 7 to 8 grams, and then I just broadcast the shrimp to big ponds at low density. I should be able to harvest 30 grams animal after releasing the 10 grams animal within probably 35 to 40 days before the disease can kick in. And by doing so, I think we can achieve very nice profitability. But if I don't have that capability to do that type of investment, and I have to deal with the existing system, for example, in somewhere like in Gujarat, in some area that you farm shrimp up to 30 grams in 150 to 170 days. I may need a line that can tolerate to that harsh environment. I think there's no such perfect line. And we need to consider all the resources that we have, all the environmental factor, and all the constraint that we are facing in order to choose not only the genetics, but also the strategy, how to overcome those issues.
Thank you, Doc. Yeah, that's a very sensible explanation. Yes. I have one more question. It's a slightly different question. I would like to ask Olivier. Since you are talking about the European experience of people doing kind of high tech farming. This is in the current scenario of lockdown and the pandemic. We are seeing a lot of revolution. Looking at the aquaponics or even agriculture. So we see a lot of households and people getting into kind of food production. So what do you think about the scope of shrimp getting into that kind of urban production and micro units producing and can sell it for a high value or things like that?
I think it's been one of the area I really loved. I did not see anybody doing really aquaponics because I lived in Japan for 4 years, and Japan loves seafood, but they have to produce outside the country and bring in. So when I was living there, I was surprised why they were not starting to produce in towers like you could see doing in New York or maybe Singapore or Hong Kong. And now you see this taking up more and more. Now, what I've seen until now, most of the aquaponics are based on lettuce production and tilapia. Very few use shrimp. But I think it's something worthwhile looking at. And I see all the investments done in Singapore for Singapore becoming independent, or at least 30% of the protein being produced domestically. So there's a big push in that direction. So I think this is something very interesting. We will see something developing further, I'm sure. Now, whether or not shrimp will be used as the animal to be produced alongside lettuce and herbs or tomatoes, I'm not sure. But I know there's a company, I think in South France, working on that with shrimp production alongside aquaponics. And I was talking with people thinking doing the same in Singapore. So I think it's something that will, how much will it become a real business versus something that will be presented in the news, but very minor. This is something else. But you see definitely in some regions, definitely in the US, in some areas, it is definitely growing. So yes, I'm very interested in that. And of this one, you could have probably more development on the methodology, whether you bring in with the RAS and you combine it with the proper vegetables being produced. I think it's something of future, yes. I'm interested in definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ravi, would you like to ask something?
Yeah. This is for Olivier and Lok. See, Chinese shrimp aquaculture is troubled by a new disease called decapod resistant virus. As such, we can call it as a new kid on the block. Every now and then we have a new kid on the block as far as diseases are concerned. And, we are not taking preemptive measures to stop the disease coming in the country. Be it India and other countries, we start doing the surveillance once the disease comes into the country. And there are news that decapod resistant virus is in Vietnam as well. And there are traces of the disease in Thailand as well. And of course, Lok doesn't want to talk about it because, the government has not declared yet. So he would not be in a position to comment about that. But what I ask you, Lok, is that, what kind of preemptive measures India has to take, because when EHP was there around in Thailand, we have not taken right preventive measures. And today it has become endemic in India. And today, the Indian industry doesn't look to be all that sensitive towards decapod resistant virus, and the authorities have not taken a call. And what kind of preemptive measures we can take to stop the disease coming into the country? Lok, you can come up with your views, and then we will listen from Olivier as well.
Okay, you hit the point. I think it's very important that we have more transparency and more sharing, and prepare resource for new challenges. I don't see anybody really take the lead on this. I raised this concern to several organizations. I didn't receive any response. I think if we have an organization with a prepared resource, for example, let's say if a researcher in some country find a new disease and a big alert, a big threat that this disease may spread to other countries or it already spread, we should be able to at least provide positive control, methods of detection to, I would say that the network of laboratory in relevant countries. Let's say Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, whatever. So you can have the resource ready, at least with the PCR methods, with the positive control, and then you can start screening and see what happened. And then you can report to the government and they may decide to go further. They may declare, they may not declare, I don't know. But at least we need to have that sort of preparedness. We don't have that yet. We keep talking about DAV, but I don't see any organization already delivered that. And we keep hearing rumors until something really happened, like wildfire, and we cannot control. And then we have an emergency task force. I would say that that would be too late. I hope that we can change the way we manage the disease until it's too late.
Yes, look, I think the need for transparency is so obvious. Before yesterday, I called, I had a chat with guys asking them what is the latest official. And for the IV, officially, is still China and Taiwan. This is the two countries, the only two countries with official declaration. So we have rumors, yes, but and then all I see is a publication that the wild population of monodon from the Indian Ocean were positive for IMNV and the IV. So that it would be in wild population of monodon in the ocean, the Indian Ocean, IMNV also, and then the DIV is only in China and Taiwan. That's all we know. And transparency, I think, is critical. And there are enough, I think, high quality laboratories in all the main Asian countries to have this network set up. I mean, the organization, the question is how to make it transparent and working. And I think it's very important to have this open exchange because each country will be hit eventually if it comes. And then we need to find a way to avoid that and to control it. Yeah, I fully agree.
In India, if you see, we have a quarantine. I mean, every broodstock bat that comes into the country gets screened in the quarantine, then only it goes to the respective hatchery. So we have a very good first level of defense for the diseases. So as it is reported, DIV is reported in several other countries. I mean, what several of us in SAP and in the industry think is that why can't we include DIV on the list of diseases to be screened at the quarantine? Because many countries don't have quarantine. We have a central quarantine. Each and every batch is getting screened. So we think, I mean, it's going to be a good preemptive measure to stop the disease coming into the country. What do you guys say?
Yeah, I agree. I would do that, yes.
Look,
yeah, I think there's some certain policy for this with regards to OAE guidelines. So they may publish a list of disease to be checked, but usually they publish that every, let's say, 5 years. It's too late. A lot of audit, a lot of I don't know, a lot of meetings before they can come up with a conclusion. Okay, we should put this in the list. I think it's okay for export, but for emergency, we need to have more level of transparency, and and each country may make the decision. Okay, I see DAV is a big threat. I put it in the list for checking any incoming broodstock. I feel like now it doesn't make sense that we keep screening for all disease. For example, like TSV, it doesn't exist, but we don't put enough effort in new threats, EMS, EHP, and potentially DIV.
Yeah, very true, Lok. We are testing something like 12 diseases or so, which are not of concern. And why should we test for TSV? I mean, most of the stocks that are there in the world are TSV resistant, but we're still checking for each and every batch, and we check for 10% of the animals or so. Is spending a lot of money on screening the diseases which are not of concern, and we're not spending money for the diseases like DIV or EHP or other new bacterial diseases. I mean, we can as well do some in a while. We can do histology also for the broodstock that's coming in. We are not doing that. I mean, we're trying to spend more money on the diseases which are not of concern. I mean, they're not really of great concern today, but we're spending a lot of money, and we're not spending any money on the histology for checking the potential new diseases. At the same time, we are not checking for these kind of emerging diseases also. I think we need to take a new stand and a new approach, for checking the broodstock that's coming into the country.
And I think, Ravi, another point, if I may, is just it's not done as a protective measure by India versus any targeted country. It's just a normal way of screening what comes in, just to make sure you don't bring a new pathogen in. So I don't see why anybody would feel upset or threatened by your recommendation. I think it makes perfect sense.
Yes, sir. Yes, if you look at the WTO sanitary and phytosanitary conditions, any importing country can come up with a new condition, keeping the larger interest of the industry in that country, I mean, they can very well do. WTO allows it, Yeah, Lok, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, for the disease that no longer exists, like TSV, I think we need to reduce the frequency of checking. For example, let's say for every 50 batches from CoronaVirus or from SAS, I will check just one sample. That's enough. But for new disease, let's say EHP, EMS, and potentially DAV1, because the level of threat is higher, so we should have more frequency. That's my point.
I would request our president, SAP President Dr. Vikas Suresh, if he has any question, please.
My question is mainly, I was looking at some of these questions that have not been answered. These are questions that are posted by the participants. And one of this line of questions I cannot go through with very short time that we have. We cannot go through every question. But then there are some questions related to the transfer of animals. I think Dr. Loktan talked about a nursery, a multi-phase rearing, where you're sequentially transferring the animals. So somebody asked, what would be the protocol for transferring a fairly large animal, an 8 grams animal, what do we do? And then there is this question from Dr. Zurida asking, can we use any kind of booster feeds before transfer? And she's clarified that, saying that just a short period of time, you can provide a feed, before the transfer, or options like that available. So if you could provide some insight into the best practices for transfer of large animals, I think that would be good. I think we can start with Dr. Loktan, but we can go down to see if others also have any inputs on it.
Okay, so now we discuss about the protocol for transfer, the mid-sized shrimp, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so like I said, I think there are a list of things that we need to consider. First is that we need to design the farm that allow us to do the transfer. Each pond is adjacent to the other pond, and we can go through a workflow from small pond to bigger pond and bigger pond, and eventually the harvest pond. Second, we need to prepare prior to transfer. Like we need to be sure that the water chemistry of the coming pond is similar to the pond that we are growing the shrimp. And we may pump the water from the new pond to the old pond. Make sure that the shrimp will familiarize themselves with the new water chemistry. Let them molt first. And the day, probably about 18 hours prior to transferring the shrimp, we may reduce the feeding rate down to only 30%. Or maybe 12 hours prior to transfer, we just stop feeding completely. And we should transfer the shrimp, to my feeling, at late evening is the best. And make sure that the water temperature in both ponds is similar. And once we transfer the shrimp at nighttime, the shrimp will have time for recovery during the nighttime. Or if we have a pond that is covered, usually you have a very stable temperature in that area, so you can transfer the shrimp at any time during the day. That's also the beauty of having the pond covers. And after you transfer the shrimp to new pond, you should not feed them at least maybe 6 hours, or let them recover after a night, and then the following day you may feed them only like 30% of their demands. You may add some probiotic, add some vitamin C, let them recover, and make sure that no cumulative mortality. For example, let's say if you transfer the shrimp and you observe 1% mortality, and the following day, if you see 2% mortality, that there's something go wrong. You may need to reduce feeding, add something in the feed to make the shrimp healthier. Yeah, and so on. So I think that, I hope that eventually we should have something like a handbook for those practices like that.
Thank you, Dr. Lupton. So you do not think of a booster feed before transfer? Huh?
What?
A sort of a booster feed, a feed that can be used, before the transfer, a few days before the transfer to, get the shrimp ready for transfer. Is there any options available?
What is that feed, sir?
She called it booster feed. It's
booster.
Just yeah.
Oh yeah. It'd be interesting. Yeah. I would prefer to use high quality feed prior to transfer and reduce the feeding rate. Sure.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I think in fish, there are certain feeds that are available where you could feed them ahead of time and get them ready for for the transfer. In shrimp, I'm not aware of any. Anybody else have points on that? Any of the other experts here?
Well, Victor, just to say that we made some of these diets, but they are not specific design for the transfer. They're just diets where you have higher nutrition and healthy ingredients included in there. And they are typically used at the stressful period, just before and after the stressful period, yes. But they were not designed for transferring 8-10 grams animals. They were typically made really more focusing on the nursery phase. The traditional one, 3 weeks until PL30, PL40, but nothing to do with the big size that Locke mentioned.
All right, back to you, Madhu.
Thanks, Suresh. I think we have Dr. Manoj Sharma, the tough farmer. He would like to ask the final question of the day's proceedings.
Thank you, Madhu, and thank to all the experts. It was a 3 hour of learning. So I have a point as a farmer to all the panelists. See, I've been listening from almost 3 hours, and we know that shrimp farming is now rise and then downfall. And then today we are talking about improved genetics and functional feeds and nurseries and double phase and triple phase systems. But in my observation in last 10 years, since Saji can also comment on this, because Gujarat, we have seen Venami in India, we have seen the entry of Venami in 2009 and 10. And up to 2017, everybody in industry has made huge money, including me and everybody in Gujarat. But now, if you see, compare with that old seeds and single line SIS seeds line, everybody made money for 7-8 years. Now today, that there are a lot of production issues are there, and we talk about improved genetics, functional feed, and nursery food phase. But today in Gujarat, what my single observation as a farmer, that the same seed feed today what we have are performing excellent in a new ponds or an isolated ponds, whereas the number of ponds which are old, cluster, and densely populated on a single creek are absolutely not performing. So this is where me as a farmer and the entire 100% farmers in the country are confused whether we need to improve our practices, or we need to be in isolation to prevent all these production flaws, or we need to think about genetic improvement, functional fix. Because today also, whatever we have, the old ponds are not performing good, whereas the new and isolated ponds are performing excellent in the given condition. I want to have opinion from Loctran or anybody expert who can give me, who can clear my confusion as a farmer. Thank you.
Dr. Loctran, did you understand the question?
Can you summarize that question?
Okay. Now, the observation is the same rootstock what we are using the last 6-7 years back. If you see, the quality of the seed was good, and we were getting successful crops in the last 6-7 years. Whereas now, with the better genetics and better functional feeds, still the crop is not good. Whereas the same seed what we are getting now, if you stock them in isolated ponds, in less dense.
I lost your voice. I couldn't hear anything.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. The question is, the seeds which are coming from these new genetic lines are performing better in isolated farms and on creeks where there are less number of ponds. Whereas the performance of the same
repeat,
seed
Madhu?
is,
I think
yeah.
Madhu, can I repeat my point?
Sure.
Loctran, can you listen to me now?
Okay, sure.
See, my confusion as a farmer is that, see, since 2010 in Gujarat, with a single line of SIS, everybody made huge money and production success. But now when we talk about improved genetics, we talk about functional feeds and single phase, double phase, triple phase culture system, nursery system. But the old pond, the old creeks are absolutely not performing. Whereas the new pond and isolated ponds with the same old seed feed medicines are performing excellent. So my confusion is that whether we need improvement in understanding the pond system, the density, the carrying capacity, the negative carrying capacity, or we should focus on improvement in the genetics, functional feed, and nurseries. Because 90% of our India are now doing 20-30% old, 20-30-year-old ponds. So the confusion is that the age of the pond, the number of the ponds on the creek are more damaging in the production rather than the quality of seed feed. Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, Dr. Mana. And I think that we have a lot of cumulative problem in our ponds, old pond, age pond, contamination, etc. A lot of things happen. And you see, usually, let's say in Vietnam, if you have new pond and you have rice season, I would say that probably like 90% chance that you can make a good harvest, no matter which source of post-larvae you're obtaining. So very nice observation. I think it's very important to be sure that the pond is properly managed, properly cleaned up, and the system is right, the farming method is right, prior to talking about genetics. And then if you have better genetics, you should have better harvest. Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. I think
Anybody has to comment on this?
Yeah, Manoj, I would like to make one additional point here. Is that, see, the degradation over a period of time, it happens, I mean, as the number of farms increase, because the discharge happens more into the creek and all that. So there is going to be a general degradation and, reduction in carrying capacity. So the thing what we can do is that, it is in our hands. Probably it's a cooperation among the farmers. I mean, so basically we need to, associate together, and probably, the farmers must be more responsible in, when it comes to discharges and things like that. I mean, and also share the information, like, I mean, when there is a disease outbreak in a particular farm, inform the others. So that way, I think, that kind of a cooperation can bring us better success. That's what I think.
yeah.
I agree,
Thank you.
Sajid. You mentioned we always talk about the carrying capacity of a pond, but actually here we are talking the carrying capacity of the region. And I remember a presentation in the past from a few of you. I know, Manoj, you presented something in Ecuador before when you had all these evolution over time from satellite view. And I've seen other. And obviously, when you have this accumulation of farms in the same area with the increased intensity of farming and more release, you can expect this negative impact. So yes, definitely.
Because last 20 years, what I am observing, the number of the ponds, the age of the pond, on the total number of ponds on a given creek, it's more important, and it is affecting much more in the production rather than we talk about the genetics and the functional traits. I think we need to, as a farmer and as a aqua industry, shrimp farming industry, we need to really focus upon the number of the ponds and the carrying capacity of the creek, and especially the sludge removing thing, that theory, which is actually, it's not a blessing. I think it's proving more curse. So we need to think about, as Sajid said, it's a responsibility that all farmers should learn and understand to keep. Even today, amid COVID, we have learned that there should be a 6 feet difference distance between two individuals. So I think there should also be a distance between the two ponds, two farms, and also the number of ponds on the creek, which has become very detrimental factor. Thank you so much, and it was a pleasure listening to you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. I sincerely thank all the panelists, Dr. Olivia, Dr. Lotron, Dilip, and Sajid Chakra. And I thank President Dr. Victor Suresh for this opportunity. And I request Dr. Suresh now to give us the take-home message from this day's proceedings.
Thank you very much, Madhu, for organizing this event. It's a very important 2 days for the shrimp farming community. You brought in excellent speakers and covered a lot of different topics that are relevant to today. And I'd like to thank you for you and everybody who was involved in it. I know that Sajid was involved, Ravi was involved, and Vijay was involved. A number of people contributed to this program, and I like to thank them all, and also for the sponsors. It's already lunchtime for those of us who come from Southeast Asia. Sorry for holding you, but I wouldn't take very long. It's very difficult to summarize a 3-hour discussion in a few minutes. But what I understand from participating in this meeting is that, as the shrimp farming evolves, the practices, for once, on one thing, some of the basics don't change. Those fundamentals are very, very important. Preparing your pond, there is no shortcut to that. And getting a good quality seed, there is absolutely no shortcut to that, and those have to be followed. But on the other hand, you have new opportunities like these new genetic lines. You have these new systems that are being experimented in our own country or in Vietnam or Indonesia. We have all that, and then one of the things that SAP is doing is to take that and putting it in front of you for your consideration. And so when you look at something like a multi-phase rearing, then you look at that option, see if it would fit. And I think Dr. Lokran gave a very good example about the cars. So there are two ways. One is, you need to buy a car that fits you, or maybe you build a road, for your car, and you have to do one or the other in order to do it. So don't take an expensive car and put it in an infrastructure that you cannot fix. It just wouldn't work. So, but as I see this evolution, as we understand things better, as we apply science, definitely there are solutions. At the same time, Dr. Manoj pointed out, problem is also getting complex because once the pond ages, once people come and build farms, next to you, there are going to be challenges, and then this is something that we have faced for the last 30 years. The shrimp farming is possible only because of the indomitable spirit of our farmers, who have sustained over a long period amid varying changes. A year in shrimp farming, is like 10 years in human life. You see so many changes that happen, but farmers have incredibly adapted to these changes. And I think what we have learned today, about the basic principles. For example, the Vibrio, Dr. Olivia talked about it. The importance of Vibrio, has been there ever since we started farming, but we need to manage that. White spot has been a problem for 30 years now, and we need to manage that. And we have new problems like EHP, and so all these things that we come to know through either experience of the farmers or through scientific research, we need to be ready to address them. And I hope that this program would have given you the idea. But if I have to give you one lesson that we need to carry home, is that we need to look at not just one aspect of the farming, but everything. When you're looking at disease management, then you need to look at feed. And when you look at Vibrio control, you need to look at feed. And then that feed has to be in accordance with, if you're going to cut down, say, for example, your feeding rate, then you need to go for a higher quality feed. So then again, it's not just one feed that is going to meet your need. The feed manufacturers themselves need to offer choices for the farmers that they can select from, and then be able to guide them. This is the feed that's appropriate for your farming conditions. So please use this feed, and this is the way you can get the best out of the feed. And I'm taking feed just as an example. For every solution that is being provided to the farmer, it has to be like that. So, so that's the message that I gathered from participating in today's very, very interesting roundtable discussion. And once again, I like to wish all the people who have attended this event a very, very happy new year, and then all the best in the crop of 2021. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President. And I would request our General Secretary, Dr. Ramesh, to give his vote of thanks, please.
Thank you, Madhugaru. Very good afternoon to one and all. On behalf of SAP, I take this opportunity to propose the vote of thanks to all those who have put their efforts to this event, the two-day webinar entitled Overcoming the Hardships in Shrimp Farming Lessons from India and Abroad. In this two-day program, we had the day one dedicated to success stories of farmers from India, in which we had speakers from East Coast, Mr. Ali Hussain, Mr. Bala, Mr. Veerachami, Mr. Ramraj, and from the West Coast, Mr. Heetal Patel, Captain Ranjit Patel from West Coast of India. I'd like to thank you all for your participation and giving a very good presentation yesterday and sharing a lot of information, which was very useful for all the farmers. And of course, we had our superstar moderator yesterday, Dr. Manoj Sharma, with his very vibrant questions and interactions. He made it a very lively day yesterday. And we had about 147 participants on Zoom yesterday and about 288 on YouTube yesterday. Today, the day two, we had the roundtable discussion among the regional experts of Asia. And I would say that this is the first time that SAP is doing this. as an experimental stuff, but it went on very well. The whole day was dedicated to roundtable. We didn't see any presentations. It was just discussions. And Mr. Madhu kept the discussions very live, rotating between the speakers. And we had a very good speaker lineup from abroad, Dr. Loktran, Dr. Olivia, Mr. Dilip, and our own Mr. Shaji Bhai. Thank you very much, sir, for your participation today. And it was very well moderated by our Vice President, Mr. Madhu Reddy Garu. Thank you so much, sir. And I would like to thank the sponsors without whom this event would not be possible. And whenever we have an event, we get very good sponsorship. They come up and are very welcome to sponsor the events like Avanti Feeds, Growell Feeds, Kemin Aqua, Poseidon Group, Synergy Group, and Vaisaki, and last but not the least, the water base. So thank you so much for your great support for SAP events always, sir. And I would like to point out that once this pandemic struck, we had the new team of SAP EC takeover, and we had a very good guiding force with our president, Dr. Victor Suresh. He has been motivating us and pushing our SAP EC team to organize programs. We have been used to organizing on-site programs, but he has pushed us, and with his support, we are able to do this webinars, which has become very successful. And he has motivated us to do this on a periodic basis. Thank you, President, for this. And I would also like to thank our past president, though he is the past president, Mr. Ravi Kumar Yellanki, Vaisaki Bayamaran. He has been supporting us always, trying to put together events and lining up speakers with his vast contacts worldwide in the aquaculture industry. He has helped a lot in coordinating with our Vice President, Mr. Madhu and Mr. Shaji. Thank you, sir, Mr. Madhu and Mr. Shaji, for lining up the speaker and putting together this nice event for this two-day program. And I'll be failing in my duty if I do not thank our Joint General Secretary, Mr. Senthil, our Treasurer, Mr. Vijayanand, Joint Treasurer, Mr. Simon, and our Coordinator, Ms. Pramila Rajan, who have all done a lot of efforts from behind the scene to putting up the event and popularizing this and giving publicity over the YouTube and social media channels like Facebook. Thank you all. And finally, last but not the least, I'd like to give a very heartfelt thanks to our participants. Like we had about 500 participants yesterday and we had 500 participants today. And of course, there are many more who are watching this program after the event. Like I just got to know from Mr. Senthil that like the event which we had yesterday, we had more than 1,200 people who have viewed this on the YouTube. Thank you all. Thanks again for all of you for making this program a big success. Thanks and bye.
Thank you, and good day to all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you all. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Treasurer
Bye,
is now
Lord.
showing his face. Thank you, Treasurer. Thank you, President. Thank you, Madhu Garu.